Bruchim Abayim to what will Emirtz Hashem be the first of a series of shiurim covering a number of the Mugadik Maamarim and Sefer Maamarim Melukat Beis. In the Misgaras of Project Melukat, Chassidim around the world have committed to studying the entire Melukat Beis, Leili Nishmas, Rav Gernor, Rav Chassid, Rav Michal, Cakiva Gershon, and then Rav Rafal, נחum, Olav Shalom, Rabbi Akiva Wagner, the beloved Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva Gdela in Toronto. I myself never was zeicha to study directly under him, but when I was in Mesivta in Toronto, in Tafshanayin Beis, I was zeicha to learn a tremendous amount from him, to watch him daven, to listen to him fabring, and just to see what a real chassid looked like. And so it's an honor to be able to pay back in some form by teaching and learning these Maamarim together with you, Le'ili Nishmasai. The Maamar we're learning is Podoh V'Shalom Tafshan Lamed Ches. It's actually the first Maamar in Melukat Beis. It was Muga for Yitas Kislev Tafshan Mem Zayin. Of course, as we know, the Rebbe said Maamarim by each Fabringen, and some of the Maamarim were never edited, and some of them were. And the Maamarim that were edited were Muga, sometimes were Muga close to the time that they were said, and many times they were Muga years later, as in this case. It was said in Lamed Ches, Muga Tafshan Mem Zayin, and we're going to be learning the Maamar as it's Muga. If you listen to the recording, and I encourage you to do it, it's quite short. And here, as the Erchim developed it, it became quite a long Maamar. We're going to study it, of course, the way it's Muga, the Nechtam Metabas HaMelech. It's a very special Maamar, this Maamar, for two reasons. First of all, historically, in Tafshan Lamed Ches, Shmini Atzeres, the Rebbe had the heart attack, and he was confined to his room for a number of weeks, till Chedesh Kislev the Maboyer, when the Rebbe went home. But even after the Rebbe went home, Fabrengens, which were then switched from Shabbos to Matzah Shabbos, were being held in the Rebbe's room and just streamed live into 770. Yutes Kislev Tafshan Lamed Ches was the first time the Rebbe came down to Fabrengen in public. And while some said it was the Seidah, the real Seidah happened later, as Chanukah, but it was definitely a very, very special occasion in which, for the first time, Melech B'Yafia Techazena Ineinu, after the Murais of Tisha Lamed Ches. So this is the first Maamar that Rebbe delivered in public, and I think that there's a big significance to the fact that the Dibra Maschel is Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. While, Pashtus, it's the Yitas Kislev Dika Maamar, but I'm sure it had a meaning at the time of the Podoh V'Shalom which the Chassidim of Deir Shvi experienced on this occasion when the Rebbe was fully recovered from the Murais again of Tishrei Tafshan Lamed Ches. The second reason why it's a special Maamar is because of the Teichen. I thought the Teichen is incredible. The main gist of the Maamar is explaining the atomic power that a Yid has when he does a mitzvah. In that the effect of the mitzvah isn't just in the here and now, but it's also retroactively what motivated the entire creation of Seder Ishtalshlus. I believe one of the chidushim in this Maamar, the Rebbe says that typically we know that Bria Sa'elam to begin with happened because Kichafitz Chesedu. It was the total Isrusa de Le'ela. The Rebbe over here in this Maamar says that in fact, even the Gili of Kichafitz Chesedu was motivated by the fact that the Eibishter saw that the Yidden are going to do the Avodah of Torah, Avodah in Milos Chasadim, the Gimel Amudim, Shalei Amoy L'Maimet. So think about that. When you do a mitzvah, you are Pashat retroactively recreating Gan Seder Ishtalshlus. So it's a huge concept. And to me, that's what makes it a very special Maamar. So here we go. Let's get right to it. I set myself a bit of an ambitious goal to get through the entire Maamar in one sitting. And because of that, well, I'm going to try to cover everything depending on the Haaretz, but it is going to be a bit of a faster pace. So bear with me on that. Here we go. Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi Mikravli Kivrabim Hayu Imadi. David HaMelech says in Tilim, the Eibishter redeemed my soul in peace from the situation of war, which I was in, Mikravli. Kivrabim Hayu Imadi, because of the multitudes, as the Mefarshim explains simply, because of the multitudes that were with me. Yerushalmi says, and the Rebbe will bring it down soon, that actually the multitudes that were with me doesn't just mean physical support, it also means a spiritual support. People were davening for David HaMelech, not just on his camp, but even in the camp that was opposite him. This war that David HaMelech is referring to is talking about the war of Avshalom, the rebellion of his own son against his kingship. And there were people on Avshalom's side who were davening for the Nitzachon of David. And so David says to the Eibishter, thank you. You redeemed my soul in peace because of these multitudes that were with me. In the beginning of the Maamar, in Sif Aleph, the Rebbe is going to spend considerable time talking about the relationship of this pasuk to the Geula of Yud Kislev, and Yud Beis Tammuz. What's coming now in Sif Aleph is not going to be directly related to the rest of the Maamar. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the recording of the Maamar, you can hear it's mamish b'sugrayim. This whole beginning, the Rebbe kind of just puts in as the beginning before he gets to the main body of the Maamar. But that's what we're going to begin with. The connection of this pasuk to the Geula of the Rabbeim throughout the generations. The Rebbe begins, of course, with the Alter Rebbe, Yud Kislev. V'yadua mashkasu chakad morazaken bala Geula b'geres hakodesh shalei b'negea la Geula d'Yud Kislev. It's well known, it's famous, that which the Alter Rebbe writes in his Igeres HaKodesh, which he wrote about the Geula of Yud Kislev. Kishakarisi b'sefer Tilim b'pasuk Podoh v'shalom nafshi. Koidem sheyischalti pasuk shalachrav yotzasi v'shalim me'Hashem shalim. When I was reading Tilim, the pasuk of Podoh v'shalom nafshi, before I began the pasuk afterwards, in other words, there's a hadgasha and the connection here to Podoh v'shalom. That's when I went out in peace from the Eibishter of peace. In other words, that's the end quote. Now the Rebbe is touching up. Sha'geula shalei shayeches li'inyan Podoh v'shalom nafshi. That the Geula of the Alter Rebbe is shayeches to Podoh v'shalom nafshi. By the way, just in preparation for the Shiur, I was looking up the actual letter. It's quite a short letter. It was addressed to Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev, and if you look in the title, the Alter Rebbe actually writes, it's written to Rabbi Yitzchak ulechol hamistoifefim b'tziloi tzel hachachma, and to all those who are seeking shelter in his shade, the shadow of wisdom, ubifrat lebanav hanechmadim hamisuloyim, especially to his sons, Rabbi Yitzchak's sons. That's what the letter was addressed to. And the Alter Rebbe begins by talking about, of course, the famous Hifli v'Higdil, the fact that even the Goyim recognize that this is a Geula only from the Eibishter. And there's an interesting paragraph that I saw, you don't really see it quoted very often in the Sichos. The whole middle of the letter, the Alter Rebbe says, Mi anoichi, who am I that the Eibishter brought me here? The whole milchama, which brought about the Meiser of Yud Kislev, wasn't really about me. Ikar ha-milchama, the Alter Rebbe says, Asher samu pneim lilchoim al teiras ha-Baal Shem Tov, v'talmidav dafka. It was a war against the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov and his students and his students' students. Ach me'eis Hashem hoisa zois lanu legalgil schus al yodeinu. It just became from the Eibishter B'Shgacha Pratis that I was the one who merited the schus to come through me. But the Mulchama and the Geula, nothing to do with me. It's the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. And it's B'schus Eretz Yisrael, etc. And in the very end of the letter, the Alter Rebbe says, B'ram ki goin da tzarich lahidiyah, that this day was Huchbal B'Kitay, Yud Kislev, the Hilul of the Magid. And then he ends off this line that the Rebbe just quoted, Kshikorisi b'Sefer Tilim, etc. I was reading the pasuk Podoh v'shalom nafshi. That's when I went out in peace. So, at any rate, from the letter of the Alter Rebbe, it emerges that his Geula is connected to Podoh v'shalom nafshi. And the Rebbe adds, Umizem muvan gamba negea la Geula shel b'nei mamalim mekayme chakad mura amtzai b'Yud Kislev. From this we can understand to the Geula of the Mittel Rebbe, which happened on Yud Kislev. That Geula is also shayches to Podoh v'shalom nafshi, even though in classic literature of Chassidus we don't find a direct connection between the Mittel Rebbe and Podoh v'shalom nafshi. But if the Alter Rebbe's Geula was connected to Podoh v'shalom, so the Mittel Rebbe's is also. In Ara 3, the Rebbe adds, there is one book in Beis Rebbe where it's noted in the Ha'ara that there actually was, even b'shaita, a direct connection between Yud Kislev and Podoh v'shalom. The Mittel Rebbe's Geula also happened in the moment when he said Podoh v'shalom nafshi. So in the Pnim of the Maamar, the Rebbe is not going with that. The Rebbe just says, B'chlal, we can understand from the Alter Rebbe, reading Tilim, Podoh v'shalom, that the Mittel Rebbe's Geula is also connected to Podoh v'shalom. Shaharei pasuk zeh b'shir Tilim ha'chodshi de'em ma'asiri l'chaydash. Because the pasuk of Podoh v'shalom is actually in the Shir Tilim of the day of the month of Yud Kislev. Yom Yud, of course, begins with Kapitel Nun Hey. Podoh v'shalom is in the middle of Kapitel Nun Hey. So that's the connection between Yud Kislev and Podoh v'shalom nafshi. The Rebbe adds in a Sugrayim something very interesting, I think. V'yesh lekasher zeh gam yim arichos habir v'chuli behadrush debra maschil Podoh v'shalom nafshi shalai. We can connect this perhaps with the fact that there's such a lengthy explanation from the Mittel Rebbe on this pasuk, Podoh v'shalom nafshi. In Shalei Tshuva, one of the Mittel Rebbe's Sfarim, there is a huge Maamar, Podoh v'shalom. In fact, most of the Maamarim, Podoh v'shalom from later Rebbeim, are based on this Maamar, and it's a tremendously arichos dike Maamar. Historically, there is no link between that Maamar and the Mittler Rebbe's Gula. It was written years before. The Gula was in Tavkuf Pei Zayin, a year before the Mittler Rebbe passed away. Nevertheless, the Rebbe is saying that, look, we see that the Mittler Rebbe has such an arichus on this pasuk. Perhaps Yesh Lekasher is that to the fact that his Geula has to do with the pasuk of Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. And in Ara 4, the Rebbe adds the explanation for what he's saying. So what if Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi is in the Shir Tilim of the 10th day of the month? So what? Says the Rebbe, V'yodua, Sh'Rabbi Seinu Nisienu Hayo Emrim Shir Tilim K'mei Shenechlek L'mei HaChodesh. The Rebbeim always said the Shir Tilim as it's divided for the days of the month. We know in Tafresh Pezayin, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that all shuls should begin saying a Shir Tilim Yomi, finishing every month. But this was a minhag which the Rabbi Seinu had been keeping since the beginning, even before that takana. So the Pashtos, the Mittler Rebbe, said the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi on Yud Kislev. So now you're going to ask a kasha. So 1 second, if the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi is connected, the Pashtos, to Yud Kislev, it's in the Shir Tilim of Yud B'Chodesh. So what was the Alter Rebbe doing reading Podoh V'Shalom on Yud Kislev? Says the Rebbe Vaiter, O Mashagulas in Hara 4. O Mashagulas ad Murazakin, Hoysa Beis Sha'amar HaPasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, Afsha Gulas, Hoysa B'Yud Kislev. What was the Gula of the Alter Rebbe doing in the time of saying Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi was Yud Kislev? Ki B'Yosei B'Maiser, the Rebbe says, when the Alter Rebbe was in jail, he brings from the letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Hoysif Lahagid Shir Tilim B'Yichud B'Shul Matzavi B'Heva. He added another Shir Tilim, a special Shir Tilim for his current situation. B'Shir Zeh HaYekam Shir Tilim Nechlak L'mei HaShavua. And that was as the Tilim was divided for the week. And if you look, you divide the Tilim by week, Kapitel Nun Hey is in the Shir for Yom Shlishi. So the Gula was on Tuesday, as we're going to soon see. So the Alter Rebbe was saying this pasuk as part of the weekly Shir Tilim. At any rate, back to the Pnim, the Rebbe is saying if the Alter Rebbe's Gula is Shaychus to Podoh V'Shalom, so is the Mittler Rebbe's Gula. And then the Rebbe adds, and as far as I can tell, this part was not in the recording. It was added later when they prepared the Maamar for Haggadah. The Gam HaGeula di Yud Beis Vid Gimel Tammuz Shachak Mochad Mur. The Geula also in our time of Yud Beis Vid Gimel Tammuz of the Rebbe the Shver, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Mali Mekoimam, the Admur HaZaken Admur HaEmtzai, who filled the place, and filled the place, as the Rebbe always explained, means took over everything that they did plus added more. From the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe, that Geula is also Shayeches L'inyan Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, is also Shayeches to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, Kidemuchach Gam Mizeh. And again, the Rebbe brings a raya from Chassidus, from the fact Shekama mi Maamar Yud Beis Vid Gimel Tammuz Maschilim Pasuk Zeh, as is proven from the fact that many of the Maamar Yud Beis Vid Gimel Tammuz and the Rebbe's Mitzayin in R7, Tavshin Gimel Tavshin Tes, begin with the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom. So the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying my Geula is connected to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. And in R6 the Rebbe adds Ulahoyer Sha'akviyas Yud Beis Tammuz B'Shnas Tafresh Pezayin Hoysa B'Yem HaShlishi V'Harei Pasuk Zeh B'Shir Tilim D'Yem HaShlishi B'Shavua. It's very likely that, like the Alter Rebbe, since Yud Beis Tammuz Tafresh Pezayin was on a Tuesday, the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Meiser was probably also saying the weekly Shir Tilim. Ubemele, he probably also said Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi on Tuesday. Maybe that was my addition that he probably said it. The point is, Yud Beis Tammuz was on Tuesday, and Tuesday has a Shir Tilim Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. So that's another point of connection between the Geula of Yud Beis Tammuz and the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. Now the Rebbe says there's another factor that all the Geulas share. Yud Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz. And that is that the Geula was on a Tuesday, or at least in something connected to the number 3. Yud Kislev was on Tuesday and in the 3rd month, the month of Kislev. Yud Kislev wasn't on a Tuesday, but it was in the 3rd month of Kislev. And Yud Beis Tammuz was on a Tuesday, even though it wasn't in the 3rd month. But this inyan of Shlishi, this inyan of thirds, all the Geulas are connected to thirds. So the Rebbe says, now in this paragraph, that the fact that the Geulas are Shaychus to Podoh V'Shalom is also connected to the fact that the Geulas are Shaychus to 3, because 3 is Shalom. So you have a triangle, right? You have the Geulas, Shaychus to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, the Geulas, Shaychus to 3, and 3 is the idea of Shalom. Let's read it inside. V'yesh loymar, the inyan zeh, hashaychus la Geula Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, this inyan that we just said, the fact that the Geula is connected to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, Shayach Gam Lazeh, is also connected to the fact Sha'Geula D'Yud Kislev Hoysa B'Yem HaShlishi Shuch B'Bei Kitoiv U'V'Chodesh HaShlishi D'Chodshei HaChodesh. At the Geula of Yud Kislev was on Tuesday, double Kitoiv, As the Rebbe brings from the Medrash and from Rashi, the Melechas Hamayim wasn't finished till Tuesday, so therefore on Tuesday got a second Kitayv. And the third month, the Gam Agula the Yud Kislev with Yud Beis Tammuz Hayeh B'Shlishi. And also Yud Kislev and Beis Tammuz were on something connected to thirds. Hagula the Yud Kislev B'Chedesh HaShlishi, Hagula the Yud Beis Tammuz B'Yem HaShlishi. Shuch B'Bay Kitayv. Yud Kislev was in the third month, and Yud Beis Tammuz was on a Tuesday. So they all share this connection to Shlishi, and that's directly connected to the fact that the Geula is connected to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. Ki ikar hachidush ba'akasu Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi hu leikol kach inyan apdiya ki im shabdiya b'shalom. Because the main chidush of the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi isn't just David HaMelech praising Hashem, thank you Hashem for redeeming me. It's thank you Hashem for redeeming me in peace. So within the pasuk Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, the main hadgasha is shalom. Ushlishi inyan hashalom. And the idea of Tuesday, or the third month, the idea of a third, is the idea of shalom. Ubemela, we now have a triangle, the Geula connected to Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi connected to the union of Tuesday, and third, which is, all the Geulas have that shared concept of being connected to thirds. Just for a moment, Ha'ara 10, the Rebbe on this, that Kislev is the third month of Chadshei HaChodesh, and that's something special. The Rebbe says, Re'elukut Levi Yitzchak, Igris, Amud Resh Hei, Resh Yud Zayin, Resh Yud Tes. These are three wonderful letters that the Rebbe received from his own father. The first one, on the occasion of his wedding. It was written on Vav Kislev, Tafresh Betes, and the Rebbe Leivik explains the Al-Pi Kabbalah, the significance of every element of the Rebbe's wedding date. The fact that it's on a Tuesday, the fact that it's Yudalid in the month of Kislev, after Shabbos Vayetze, Agansa Arichas. And in the section dealing with the month of Kislev, so Rabbi Leivik writes that the month of Kislev is the third month from Tishrei, just like Sivan is the third month from Nisan. And there's a maila of the Shlishikite, of the thirdness of Kislev over the thirdness of Sivan, in that the Avodah from Nisan onwards is Avodah of Er Yashar, Tzadikim, whereas the Avodah of Tishrei and onwards till Kislev is the Avodah of Er Chayzer. And he says that's why actually the Luchas Rishonos that were given in Sivan didn't last. They were broken with Egel Azav. Only the Luchas Shniyos, which were given after Tishrei, had a Kiyum, because they were Shaychus to the Avodah Satshuva. So essentially, I think what the Rebbe is bringing from this letter is that here you see what's the significance of Kislev being Chedesh HaShlishi, the Chadshei HaChodesh, that's actually more special than Sivan. Same thing as in the second letter, Resh Yud Zayin. That's a letter that Rabbi Leivik wrote to the Rebbe on his second anniversary. Tafresh Tzadik Aleph, Likras Yudal Tesvav Kislev. And over there also the Rebbe explains the significance of the dates. And he also says that the Kislev is higher than Sivan because a little different spin. In Sivan there was Matan Torah, we got the Torah. But the Mesiras Nefesh on Torah only happened in Kislev at the time of Chanukah. Or it's Nigla the Torah, Pnimius HaTorah. Nigla the Torah was in Sivan, Pnimius HaTorah was in Kislev, which is why so many Chassidish Yamim Tovim are in Kislev. The Rebbe writes Yud Tes Kislev, Yud Kislev, and also Chav Tes Kislev. Fifth night of Chanukah, when the Alter Rebbe had the second Geula. So it's also Pnimius HaTorah, and he says that they're both linked. The fact that the Yidden had Mesiras Nefesh on Torah in Kislev is the reason why in that month it was in Zgala Pnimius HaTorah. And the same thing with the third letter, which is not a letter to the anniversary, it's a letter to it's about Yud Tes Kislev. And over there, the Rebbe addresses also the fact that it's because it was on Tuesday, and explains the significance of that. Same thing, it's the third month of Tishrei. So the point is, in all these three letters, you see the significance of Chedesh HaShlishi l'Chadshei HaChodesh. And the Rebbe adds in Ha'ara 10, or Rebbe Kutzichas Chelik Aleph, Amud 75, Bir HaShayches the Chedesh HaShlishi b'Chadshei HaChodesh l'Gili Pnimius HaTorah. The Rebbe also has an explanation of why the third winter month is Pnimius HaTorah, and it's also related to the concept of Tzadikim Bali Tshuva. If you look up the Sikh in Chelik Aleph, the Rebbe over there explains famously that Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, etc. is the Avodah of Tzadikim, Tishrei, etc. is the Avodah of Bali Tshuva. Matan Torah in Sivan was the Matan Torah of Nigla the Torah. Matan Torah in Kislev was the Matan Torah of Pnimius HaTorah, and one is related to the other. Tshuva, what do we know about tshuva? It's higher than Torah, right? Even if you violate your relationship with the Eibishter based on Torah and mitzvahs, you can fix it with tshuva. But the whole koyach of tshuva comes from the Torah. Same thing as with Chassidus. It may be a gili of the deepest parts of Torah, but it's all nimshach by the Matan Torah of Nigla Torah. Elamai, then it was behelim, and it only came begili later with the Avodas HaTshuva. So in other words, the connection of Chotshei HaCherev to the gili of Pnimis HaTorah is because Chotshei HaCherev is the Avodah of Tshuva, and Tshuva is what brings out the singing of Pnimis HaTorah. Anyway, very interesting Hara. In Hara 12, based on what the Rebbe is saying in the Pnim, what are we saying in the Pnim? That the reason or the significance of the Geula of the Alter Rebbe being connected to Chidash HaShlishi is the fact that Shlishi is Shalom. So it's curious then that that's not mentioned in the Alter Rebbe's letter. The Alter Rebbe's letter, the Rebbe says in Hara 12, the only significance we find related to Tuesday in the Alter Rebbe's letter is the fact that this is the day of Huchal V'Kitayv. No, he should say the Gula was Yom HaShlishi, the day of Shalom. But why is he only picking the part of Huchal V'Kitayv? So the Rebbe says, actually, based on my vart, we'll make that also part of the equation. Yesh Leimar, the Rebbe says, the Inyan Huchal V'Kitayv. Echadum Lechas Hamayim V'echadum Nachta Shel Yom Hu. What is the Teichen of Huchal V'Kitayv? So in Pashtos, it's the fact that Melechas Hamayim was only completed on Tuesday, when you kavu Hamayim, right? While the waters gathered, and the Eibishter was able to make the Yabasha. So the teichen of that is she'oz nisbarir gam hamachlekes demlechas hamayim va'ad shanasa toiv. What happened on Tuesday didn't just complete the work of Monday. It was mevarer the issues that may have arisen out of Monday. Monday was machlekes, the first time the Eibishter did something to divide. And on Tuesday that division was nisbarer and it became toiv. By saying ki toiv, you made the machlekes good. V'lochein shayach gam zeh huchbal b'kitayv l'Podoh b'shalom nafshi. Therefore, it becomes very good why this Vart of Huchal V'Kitayv is connected to Podoh b'shalom nafshi. Ki amitis inyan apdiya b'shalom hu ki mavur lekaman sifid al. We're going to get later in the Maamar. Shegam inyan ha'olam miloshen helem atzma maskimim chulu. The true peace, true redemption in peace, is when the things that seem to be against you join your team. When the inyanim of Velt that are hidden, hiding a likus, when they come back and are maskim to the likus. Bedugmas mashagam anshi Avshalom mispalul in Shchina Shel David. Like in the physical sense of the story. People in Avshalom's camp were supposed to be against him, they're davening for David Melech's success. Ubemela, the fact that Alter Rebbe chooses to stress the word of Huchal V'Kitayv is not bistira, and as a matter of fact, it supports this whole union of connecting Shlishi to Shalom, because the true Shalom is in Huchal V'Kitayv, is in being Mevareh Machlekas and making it into Tayv. And when you get to the closing, Shlishi being Shalom, the Rebbe is mitzayin to Chilik Chaf Aleph, Sichon Yisrael, where the Rebbe deals with the Zayars and Vayichan Sham Yisrael. The Rebbe is mevar ba'arichos of this nekuda of Shlishi being Shalom. That one is, there's only one Melechatchila. Two is division. And three, Shlishi HaMachriya is not just where you decide that one of the people is right. Shlishi HaMachriya has the power to be koilel both deis in the Shlishi and bring out a whole new thing. So it's the true Shalom because it brings out the best of both. Both of the tzdadim of the shnayim actually fuse. So therefore, Shlishi is mamish the union of Shalom. Anyway, this is Sif Aleph, kind of like an introductory point. The connection of the Gula B'tis Kislev to Podoh Shalom, the connection to Shlishi, which is the union of Shalom. Now the Rebbe jumps in to the pasuk itself. Base. V'hinei b'pasuk zeh shnei pirushim. In the pasuk of Podoh Shalom, we find two general explanations in Chazal. What is or who is the subject of the pasuk? Pirush HaPashut, Podoh v'Shalom Nafshihu. The simple meaning in the pasuk is Shakadosh Baruch Hu Peidas HaTzadikim. David HaMelech is speaking on behalf of all tzaddikim like him, and he says that I know that the Eibishter will always redeem me from bad situations. Hein lifi pashtus ha'inyan shekoyal p'dias David. Literally, in the literal sense of the word, it's talking about David HaMelech himself, his redemption. Shakadosh Baruch Hu Podoh Yisem Yam L'chamis Shebo Olav, where the Eibishter redeemed David from all the wars that he had to encounter. Kedusha b'Yerushalmi, Shepodoh v'Shalom Nafshi, Koyal P'dias David min Milchemes Avshalom, as the Gemara says, Yerushalmi Rosh Hashanah, that the Podoh v'Shalom Nafshi, Shalmi and Saita, That Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi is referring to David's redemption from the Milchama of Avshalom. V'chein hu, and the Rebbe says, we can also say, Gam benegel Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi da Geula is Yitas Kislev, Yud Beis Tammuz, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Podoh Tzadikim. We saw in our Podoh V'Shalom, Yitas Kislev, Yud Kislev, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, that they were all situations where the Eibishter was paid to the Tzadikim. If you hear the recording, the Rebbe says the Pasha Pshat and Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi is that the Eibishter redeems those who are Hilchim B'drachav. All Tzadikim, anybody who goes in his ways. So in this Pirush, Podoh is the Eibishter. The person, the Redeemer is the Eibishter. The redeemed is the Tzaddik. Or Pirush HaBezu K'Maamar Azal, the second Pirush is, like we know from the Gemara. Gemara says in Brachas, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter says, Kol ha'osek b'Torah v'gmilas chasadim u'mispalel l'matzibur chuli ke'ilu p'da'ani chuli. Any Yid who deals in Torah, in gmilas chasadim, davas with a minion, it's as if he has redeemed Liu Levanai, as the Gemara says, me and my children from among the nations of the world. But the point in this Pirush is that the subject is the opposite. Sheha'adam ha'osek b'Torah v'chuli hu paid as HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'vayachol. It's the opposite is true. The Redeemer is the Yid, and the redeemed is the Eibishter. So like the Rebbe does many times, we have to understand the connection between these two explanations. There has to be a connection. And there has to be a connection not just because of the classic Rebbe style connection of two Pirushim. The Neisaf ala Yadua Shakala Pirushim Shabayisi Pasuk Shayachim Zalazeh. Besides, based on what we know, that every time you have multiple Pirushim in one pasuk, they're all shaychus to each other. Har 17, Yadua Harayah Lazem Mishatnes, famous Tzich Chilek Gimel told us, where the Rebbe explains that Shatnez, as the Gemara says, you're only over on Shatnez if you have Shua, Tavi, Venuz, three types of combining the materials, and the reason why you're only chayav on all three is because Torah put it all in the same word. So from there we learn that whenever you have multiple elements within one word, multiple pirushim within one word, they have to be connected. That's the basic reason. If I have two pirushim, Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, the very fact that they're two separate pirushim means, and they're in the same pasuk, means that they have to be connected. But here the Rebbe says there's another point. And again, a raya from the Chassidus. Fascinating raya. The fact that in the Maamarim of Yitas Kislev, that all the Rabbeim said, and the Rebbe brings a whole Rishim over here in R18, from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the Rebbe Marash, from the Rebbe Rashab, Udi Yud Beis Tammuz, she'azaya ingin the Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi kipshutei kana, where again the Frierdiker Rebbe experienced, and actually both is referring to the Alter Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe experienced Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. In those Maamarim, and by the way, here the Rebbe has many more Maamarim because in the other Ha'ara, it was just Maamarim which begin with Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi. Here, this is Maamarim that don't necessarily begin with Podoh V'Shalom, but the Yitas Kislev Dikim Maamarim, Yud Beis Tammuz Dikim Maamarim. In these Maamarim, Muva Bekama V'Kama Mehem B'Tchilasam V'Reishisam Drashas Chazal Hanal. It's a bringt sich in the beginning of these Maamarim, the Drasha of Chazal, this Drasha of Chazal, Kol Esek B'Torah. Hari is a Madgish Oid Yoser, the Shnei Pirushim Ela Sheachim Zalazeh. The fact that the Rabbeim saw fit to bring in their Maamarim related to Yitas Kislev Beis Tammuz, days of Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, and they brought down this drasha of Chazal, is the mechiach that there's a connection between the Pashto Pshat of Podoh V'Shalom and the Gemara Pshat of Podoh V'Shalom. So we have to understand the connection between the two Pirushim. They're opposites. In one, the Redeemer is the Eibishter, the redeemed is the Tzadikim. In one, the redeemed is the Redeemer is the Yid, and the redeemed is the Eibishter. So the Rebbe says a possible answer. V'af shegam lefi Maamar Azal hanal medaber hakosuf gam beinyin p'dias Yisrael p'da'ani li ulebanai. Yeah, even according to the Gemara's pshat, at least with regards to the redeemed, it's not only the Eibishter, also the Yidden are included. When you do Torah Avedig Mos Chasadim, you are redeeming the Eibishter ulebanai and the Yidden. U'b'chidush hagados Marsha Sham, Marsha explains over there, Taka, on this Gemara, that the pshat in the Gemara is, the way the Gemara is learning the pasuk, is Shashchina Amra Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi im mikravli. The Eibishter is talking, and he's saying, Podoh, the Yid, who's learning Torah, davening with a minion, giving tzedakah, the Yid redeemed my soul in peace, and he also redeemed mikravli, those who are close to me. Lashon Krev, Nainu Banai. So it's mamish in the pasuk. In the pasuk, it's mamish saying that the Yidden are being redeemed. So there you have a tzad hashava, yeah? both Pirushim are equal. They're both equally talking about the redeemed being a Yid. Says the Rebbe, Harizal ben Agela Hanifte. That's only been a to the person being redeemed. Aval ben Agela HaPoida. But the Redeemer, there you got to admit, it's a contradiction. Two separate Pirushim. Hadi lefi Pirush HaPashut, Podoh Goimer, Koyal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Or lefi Maamar Azal Hanal, Podoh Goimer, Koyal Adam, Esek B'Teira V'Choli. According to the simple pshat, who's redeeming the Eibishter? Redeeming David HaMelech, redeeming the Tzaddikim. According to the Maamar Azal, who's redeeming? The Yid is redeeming. So we got to understand what's going on. And the Rebbe is only going to return to this in Sif Yud. And essentially the Rebbe's answer is going to be, as this theme is going to be developed, the Rebbe's answer is going to be that actually one enhances the other. Both are true. There are times when the Eibishter is paid to the Tzaddik, paid to the Yidden. There are times when the Yidden is paid to the Eibishter. But the fact that a Yid is paid to the Eibishter through his Aveda enhances the Pediyah of the Eibishter to the Yid. In other words, the Pediyah of the Eibishter to the Yid on its own would be on one level. But through the fact that the Yid is paid to the Eibishter, the Pediyah of the Eibishter to the Yid becomes even greater. That's where we're heading. But we have a long way to get there. Okay. Let's go to Seif Gimel. The Yuvan Zabahakta. So we're going to understand this question, put it on the side. It's only coming back in a couple of pages. New discussion. A preface. Shegimel ha'inyanim deteiro gmachot tefillah b'tzibur shal yadam p'da'ani liu lebanai heim gimel ha'amudim shaleim ha'elam ha'emet. The three things that the Gemara chooses to describe as the tools to bring about the Pediyah of the Eibishter and the Pediyah of Yidden, Torah, Gemilas Chasadim, and davening, are identical to what we find elsewhere in the Mishnah and Avos, that there are three amudim upon which the world stands. Torah, Aveda, Gemilas Chasadim. Mishkasav Chiddushei HaGadosh Marsha Sham, Val Derech Ze Berashba Sham. Marsha writes it befedish, actually. If you look at the Marsha, he says, I just prepared myself the quote over here. Kolesik B'Torah Gemilas Chasadim U'Mispalel Hein Gimel Amudei Eilam Sheshaninu Al Gimel Dvarim Ha'Eilam Eimed Al HaTorah Val Aveda Gemilas Chasadim. These three things are the exact things that are the pillars of the world. The Rashba is not the Rashba in Brachas. There's a separate sefer in Chiddushei Rashba called Chiddushei Rashba al Agadas Hashas. Separate sefer that he wrote just on Agadas, many different Agadas. And that's where the Rashba brings this word that the Rebbe is quoting over here. He doesn't say, actually, that the three inyanim are the three amudim shleim ha'elam ha'emed. He actually says that the three inyanim are machshava dibur u'maisa. But elsewhere in Chassidus, we explain the machshava dibur u'maisa are connected to the three amudim. So perhaps that's what Rebbe means here, al derech zeh. Al derech zeh, connecting the three inyanim of the Gemara to the three major inyanim that are pillars of the world. Anyway, that's what it is. The three things in the Gemara that it takes to redeem the Eibishter are the three things Shalei Ma'elam Ha'emet. By the way, in Ayah 20, the Rebbe quotes from Avos, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Beis, V'sham Mishnah Yudches Ha'ilam Kayam. Like as if it's one flow. Because in the end of Perek Aleph in Masechta Avos, it says, Ashlesh Dvarim Ha'ilam Kayam, Al Adin Ba'al Emes V'al Hasholem. And the Rebbe, as we're going to see over here, is going to mix the two. Look at the very next words. Umikevan shekiyum va'amidas ha'olam. See, kayam and oimid. Both things there. So, at least in this Maamar, the Rebbe is going with the guy that the three things shaleim ha'olam oimid and the three things shaleim ha'olam kayam are somewhat linked. And Mefarshim spend much time, figuring out what the difference between the two Mishnayos. In the Maamar of the recording, the Rebbe said that the three Yonim Torah V'Gemilas Chasadim are the same three things, was afderuf is the Eilam Oimid un ha'Eilam Kayam. Said it together. It's the three things upon which the world stands and upon which the world exists. So again, Kanira, in this Maamar that I was going with the Mahalach, they're both the same thing. I was thinking, I didn't see it anywhere, I didn't have time to look it up too much, but Din, Emes, and Shalim are very much connected to Torah V'Gemilas Chasadim. Din is more the Kav of Aveda, Emes is the Kav of Torah, and Gemilas Chasadim is Shalim. So perhaps that's just a thought. Although I should point out, the same year actually, Pinchas Lamed Ches, the Rebbe spoke a Sikh in Pirkei Avos, and the Rebbe said that his own beer, in the difference in Eilam Oimid and Eilam Kayam, he said, Eilam Oimid is the world standing. You have a world standing, but it could also be a Eilam Shamim. It could be a desolate world. The world could be standing, but it could be desolate. It's only with Din, Emes, and Shalom that the world has a kiyum, like an everlasting, proper, functional standing. Just interesting to point out. But again, here the Rebbe seems to be linking both Mishnayos. Anyway, says the Rebbe, "Umikevan shekiyum va'amidas ha'ilam hu al gimel amudim eila." Since the existence, the support of the world, is on these three pillars, tzarich loymar, and the Rebbe just dropped the bombshell in a half a line. The gimel inyanim eila hayugam b'tchilas habriya. Memuzagim. That these three inyanim existed in the beginning of creation. After all, what does it mean olam oimid? The world stands on these supports. It needs these supports to exist. That means that at every stage of its existence, it needed to have that support. So don't just tell me, because Pashtus you think, that the Mishnah is telling you today, you Yid, you should know that when you learn Torah, when you do Aveda, you do Maschal Sadim, you are keeping the world alive. But the Rebbe says no. The Mishnah is telling us inherently, these three things are the support of the world. So they had to be there even before Yidden came around. Even in the beginning of creation, these three things existed as the support of the world. We're going to see in the end of the Sif, they had a different shape, they had a different form. They weren't Torah, Aveda, and Gemach Mamish. But the three pillars had to be there because they are the Amudei Ha'olam. By the way, as a complete side, but super interesting, you might know that when the Rebbe came to America in the beginning, Tafshan Aleph, one of the first things that the Frierdiker Rebbe appointed him to do was to run Merkaz. And as part of that, the Rebbe began to publish the Shmusim mit Kinder. We know today as Talks and Tales in English. And the Rebbe designed the logo on top of the Shmusim. There was luchas with a world with three pillars, Torah, Aved, Maschadim, and the background was clouds. And this started in Tafshin Beis, 1942. 18 years later, in Tafshin Chaf Aleph, I think, 1960-61, someone wrote to the Rebbe a whole letter criticizing this logo. Why are there clouds and why are the luchas square? It's one of the earliest references in the Rebbe's Torah about the square luchas. And also he wanted to know, I'll just quote you the letter over here, the Rebbe says, so we made a picture of the world standing on three pillars. You're asking me that a kid, it's a kid's publication. A kid sees a world standing on three pillars. No, what are the pillars standing on? Where's the floor of the pillars? In other words, pillars need also support. So the Rebbe says, first of all, you're not criticizing me. Your heart is on the Mishnah. The Mishnah is like Melukat. And the Rebbe goes on at length that be'emes, even in the Mishnah, you don't require any hesber. Everyone understands that Torah, Veda, Gemilas Chasadim, einam amudim gashmim ki muvan ruchni. They're not physical pillars. They have a spiritual meaning to them, even though it's mizbate, even though it expresses itself actually in actual action, learning Torah, Aveda, and actually giving tzedakah, Gemilas Chasadim. And everybody knows that the Torah comes from the Nesan HaTorah, from the Eibishter. It doesn't require any explanation. So the Rebbe says, "Kumeisha Mishnah Mishtameshes B'Signon Ha'Olam Oimid Hameshutav Gam LaAmida Shel Davar Gashmi Al Omud Gashmi Afshe Kavanasa LaMuvan Aruchni VaPnimi Shebazeh." The Mishnah uses the words Olam Oimid, which could be interpreted for a physical support, even though it's obvious that the spiritual meaning is what's intended. Ve'eno Chesheshesh L'Sum Toz Bazeh. And doesn't worry about any mistake. As the Mefarshim themselves, there are many people, there's many Mefarshim. Rabim Hein B'Meyuchad, B'Ma'oid B'Meyuchad, L'Maseches Avis. Avis is zeichet to a multitude of Pirushim. Ein af echad oimed ala shayla al ma oimdim ha'amudim. Nobody asks the question, what are the pillars standing on? So gam b'tzir hashar lahavdil l'daiti. The Rebbe says, in the shar of the Shmusim, the Rebbe uses the word lahavdil, by the way. It's very fascinating. Lahavdil between the Mishnah and the Shmusim. Ein kol mokim l'tos. So thank you very much for your ha'ara, but it's pasha that we're talking about amudim ruchni, and we're just illustrating it in a physical illustration. But the idea of Torah, Aveda, and Gemach being the supports is spiritual supports. So I'm just bringing that in as an aside, because you see here, it's pasha that olam oimid means the kiyum va'amidas ha'olam is on these things. So if the kiyum va'amidas ha'olam is on these things, they have to exist, they have to accompany the world at every step of the way. So before explaining what it means, in other words, what shape, what form did these three amudim take in the beginning of creation, The Rebbe first addresses a side note, which I mentioned in the introduction. Even though it's known that when the Eibishter created the world originally, it came out of his pure kindness. And only now we need to work from below to make a nisarusa, to make an awakening, which elicit a response from the Maila. So what are you saying? That B'tchilas HaBriyah has to be supports. In other words, something which is making the world exist. The Eibishter brought the world into existence out of his chesed. Says the Rebbe, no. The whole chassidus, boom, drops a bomb. Afal pikein, mikevon shekavanas habriya milechatchila. He b'shvil Yisrael u'b'shvil HaTeira. Since the entire intent, the reason behind creation, the motivating factor of the Bria, was for Yidden and for Teira, tzarich loymar, shegimul inyanim elehim amudei ha'elam gam b'tchilas yisavusai. So these three things, which are part of that kavana of the Yidden and Teira, had to be there. In other words, the Rebbe is saying that Ki Chafetz Chesed didn't come out of a vacuum. Ki Chafetz Chesed came as a byproduct of the retroactive effect of the Gimel Amudim Shalei Amei Lamayimit. As the Rebbe explains in 25, actually. 25, the Rebbe quotes Shli Yisrael B'Shvil HaTeira. So he quotes from Rashi, of course, the beginning of Parshas Bereishis. Ure'ei Shari Eirasham. See the Mittel Rebbe's Maamar, which he quoted in the previous article. Sha'akavana de Teira u'mitzvahs hi tchilas ha'machshava. The intent that there should be Yidden who learned Teira and Mekayim mitzvahs was the beginning of all the thoughts. It was the very first motivation in creation. If not for the fact that my covenant exists day and night, all the laws of heaven and earth I would never have put into place. It's the Mittler Rebbe's words, if you think about it. From the kavanah, from the tchilas hamachshava of Teira mitzvahs came a ratzin and a chafetz chesed to have ishtalshalos. Ure'egan hemshech hayin beis. The Yisrael v'Teira hen hakavana hapnimis shebishvilam hayu kol hagiluyim. The yesh lemer al pi anal koilel gam hagilu the chafetz chesed. The Yidden and Teira are the be all end all. We are the innermost kavana for which all giluyim that preceded us came about. All the giluyim. Chafetz chesed is also a giluy. So chafetz chesed is a giluy that came out, that was born out of the kavanah primis. So all the Maamarim, which spend so much time, ki chafetz chesed, all the Maamarim of Rosh Hashanah. Adam Rishon was the tachlis, right? Because until Adam Rishon came about, it was ki chafetz chesed. Now Adam Rishon's Aved is going to inspire the Eibishter v'chulu. Here the Rebbe is going, no. Ki chafetz chesed is also part of the chain reaction that came after the kavanah of Yidden and the kavanah of Teira. And now the Rebbe is going to explain what that is. Or what did it look like? What's pshat that the Gimel Amudim existed b'tchilas habriya. And it begins with a very famous Teira. V'ho inyan hu. D'hini yedua Teiras Rav Magid v'Teiras Chakam Morazake. Shenikras gam al shmei. There's a Teira of the Magid, and there's a Teira of the Alter Rebbe. It's actually called a Teira of the Alter Rebbe, even though the Chayda he was just repeating what the Magid said. It's also called his Teira. Al Maimer Azal, Da Ma L'mayla Mimach, on the Mishnah in Ovis, which literally means, be aware, know what's above you. But the Chassidische Taich is, the Kol Masha L'mayla HaKol Hu Mimach. Whatever exists L'mayla, Kama Mimach. Everything comes from you. So before we even go further, we got to stop here because there's some Baichike Ha'aris over here. Teiras Rav Magid, the Rebbe is mitzayin to the Likutei Amarim and the Ir Teira. Where over there it's a very short line. It's pretty much as the Rebbe quotes it over here. The Magid's Teira is Da Ma L'mayla Mimach, Pirush, Da Kol Masha L'mayla HaKol Mimach. That's that one line. Whatever is L'mayla, all comes from you. The way it's quoted in the name of the Alter Rebbe, or 27, Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Daled, Hayem Yem Yud Gimel Iyar. Hayem Yem, of course, came first. Hayem Yem was written in Tafshin Gimel. So I'll just read you. I have both Lashonos over here. Tafshin Daled, the Friedrich Rebbe said HaSicha, says Farana Maimer, from Yitzchak Rabbeinu Azaken, said Gezok Berabim, Kumendik dem ersten Mal from Mizrich. The first time the Alter Rebbe came back from Mizrich, he said this Teira. Da Ma L'mayla Mimach, Pirush. And listen to this because it's going to come up again in Arah 30. Pirush. As das was is L'mayla. is das mimach. That whatever is lamaila is from you. Hainu, as the ganze Metzias von the Spheres, wird nis have, nor durch Isarusim Dulosata von Avedas Anivrayim. That the whole existence, the whole Metzias of the Spheres is created only through the awakening which we do through our Aveda. Okay, that's the quote from Tafshin Daled. Quote from Mayem Yem, Yud Gimel Iyar, very similar. It's in Hebrew, in those years that the Alter Rebbe used to say short Maamarim, Omar, he once said, Da ma l'mayla mimach, da, ki kol ma sheyesh l'mayla, b'partzufim u'sfiras ol yenes, everything which exists above, and all the partzufim, and all the higher spheres, hakelu mimach shatoli ba'avedas adam. Everything is from you, it depends on the Aveda of the person. So you can see already over here that there's a Torah of the Maggid, it's a one-liner, and there's a Torah of the Alter Rebbe, which essentially is the same thing. He even said it according to Tafshin Daled, Kumendik from Mizrich, right, the first time it came from the Maggid. But there's a variation there. Yeah, it's important. So, it's a Torah from the Maggid, Torah from the Alter Rebbe. So look in 28. Ure'ei ba'arucha, dibra maschol shalim rav, the Matzah Shabbos Parshas Vayeshev Shana Zu, Tafshin Lamed Ches. B'mashali Omar Zeh B'Shem Emrei. The very next Shabbos, it's a Tuesday, Tis Kislev. The next Shabbos, the Rebbe says a Maamar, Matzah Shabbos, Shalom Rav. Hopefully we're going to learn it actually in this series, Be'ez Hashem. It's Muga in Melukat Beis. But the next year, this is Tafshin Mem Zayin, this is Muga Tafshin Mem Ches. And over there, the Rebbe asked the Kasha, he quoted this Torah from the Maggid from the Alter Rebbe, and he said, why is it called the Torah of the Alter Rebbe? Why didn't he say it B'Shem Emrei? Yeah? So, the Rebbe says, see that Maamar, where I explain, that it's because the Inyan became united with him, it became part of his essence, and it became his. Teira dilehi, yeah? Becomes your Teira. Maybe it's Kedai, I copied it down because in the, remember, by the time this Maamar was Muga, Shalom Rav wasn't yet Muga. So when the Rebbe is referring to you to this Maamar, he's referring you to the Bilti Muga version of the Maamar. But when we look in the Mugadik version, later on in this Chelek, that whole section of the Maamar was moved into Hara 99. And there, the Rebbe asks the question, and he says, First of all, the Inyan is already found in earlier Pirushim. It's not a Chiddush of the Maggid, so it's an earlier Mefarshim. The Yoser Nira Leimar, a better answer, because the question isn't only about this Torah, the question is about Tanya. So much of Tanya is quoted from the Maggid, etc. Ki motzinu kein v'kama v'kama gedeli Yisrael, v'avu in dekulu Rabbi Lezer HaGadol, sheberubim kekulam de Maamar of lehis keshem Rabbi, af shalei amar davar shalei Rabbi Leila. Rabbi Lezer HaGadol is famous as saying, I never said anything that I didn't hear from my teacher. No. Yet there's so many Maamarim of Rabbi Lezer that are attributed only to him. So why doesn't he say it in the name of his teachers? So the Rebbe says, the Pshat is like this. Bezefanim, there's two ways that the Rebbe explains it. Over there, one is, there's a Gemara that says in Yevamis that they told Rabbi Yochanan, Talmidcha yeshe v'deiresh stam, v'hakol yedim kishelchahi. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't have to say, your student doesn't have to say that's coming from you, because everyone knows that whatever his Torah is your Torah. So that can apply to the Alter Rebbe. The Shar of Tanya here writes everything is look at the Pisfarim and Pisefrim. And since the Tanya is Torah Shabiksav, whatever Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya applies to all his Chassidus. It's like a public disclaimer, for everything. Everything I have is from the Maggid. So that's one beer. A second beer that the Rebbe brings over there in Shalom Rav is La'achre Shashamash Zemir Abbaisav Hisig Zeh B'sichlehu V'ad Shenikras Al Shmoi Torah Soy. He heard it from his teacher, but he really understood it. It became his, and therefore that's not just a justification, but actually ein loymar b'shem emrei. At this point, once he understands it so deeply, he shouldn't say it b'shem emrei anymore. Because at this point, the reason why he believes this to be true is because he understands it to be true, not because he was makabel it from his teachers. So So in Shalom Rav, in the Mugadik version, that's the second answer. Then it brings over here the first answer. That's the first answer that he brings. Then, back to R28, the Rebbe continues. The truth is, it's a separate Torah. It's improved upon. There's a novelty in the Alter Rebbe's Torah presentation of it over the Maggid's presentation. And we're going to see that in a moment. That there's something that the Alter Rebbe is saying more than what the Maggid is saying. So it's interesting. In Shalom Rav, the Rebbe brings two answers. And like by default, you can assume that it's his teachers because whatever he says is from his teachers. And the second answer that it became his. Here the Rebbe brings that it became his, and then he adds what seems to be a third answer, that it's actually a different Torah. It's actually a Chiddush. And I think, if you look in Shalom Rav, the Rebbe has a sugrayim at the end of R99, where he seems to be meramez that also. He says, "B'frat b'negeya la'admur hazaken she'yin neshama chadasha she'gam b'hu yinyonim sheshama mirabaysav gila b'hem al yedei sheheviam b'havana v'asaga d'chabad er chadash." Since the Alter Rebbe is a neshama chadasha, so he's megala er chadash through Chabad in everything that he learns from his teachers. Ubemela becomes a new thing. So I think over there that Rebbe is being meramis to this teretz over here also. That there's a chidush in the Alter Rebbe's presentation over the Maggid. It's a different Torah. It's the reason why it's different Torah. It's a chadash. It's shama chadasha. Chabad makes it into a new thing. In the parentheses, the Rebbe says that Egam dibra mascha taresa memvav, in Melukat from Shvuas memvav. So I looked it up. I think what the Rebbe is referring to is that there's a line because the Rebbe brings this Maamar, this Vart Dam Malam Malam Yimach, in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, and the Alter Rebbe. So he brings it from the Baal Shem Tov. Then he says, "Uvamakim acher huva derech zeh b'shem Rav Maggid, uvamakim shlishi huva b'shem Rabbeinu Azaken." And there in Memvav the Rebbe says, "V'yesh shinui l'sheinos b'neihem ve'en kan mekayme." There's differences of expression between them. Ve'en kan mekayme. I think the Rebbe is saying like that's the yisoid for his final answer over here. Since it's shinui l'sheinos, there has to be a chiddush. If they expressed it differently, so they're actually expressing a different idea. Ubemela, that's why it's called the Teiras Admor Hazaken, because it's actually his own Torah. Not just because he's a Talmud of the Maggid, and not just because it was Nisatzim and it became his, but because it's actually a new Torah. Anyway, back to the Maamar, Maarich very much in this. Back to the Maamar. The Maggid and the Alter Rebbe both say, Dam Alamayla Mimach means the Kol Mashalamayla HaKila Mimach. If you read the Torah the way it is from the Alter Rebbe, it's understood Shal Yedei Aveda Sa'adam Naseh Ha'inyan L'mayla Gam Koydem Ha'aveda. But Pashtus, you learn Dam Alamayla Mimach, even according to the Chiddush Pshat, means that you should know whatever you do has an effect. Whatever exists in the higher realms is dictated based on your actions over here. But it's only going forward, not backward. But if you look at the Rebbe's Torah, it's actually move on that what the Avedas Adam accomplishes is retroactive. The existence of the concept Lamaila, even before the Yid did what he did, is because of what the Yid does later. And here you have Ara 30, which the Rebbe just referred to, where the Rebbe quotes the Lashon of the Sikh and Tafshin Dalet. Re'ei Sefer HaSikh Tafshin Dalet Sham, B'pirush Da Mala Mala Mimach, an explanation of the Torah, She'kol HaMetzius Da HaSfiras. That was Lashon of the Fidik Rebbe. Hainu as the ganze Metzias from the Sfiras. The whole Metzias of the Sfiras. Leirak Toisvis Erev V'chayetz B'zeh. Not just you're adding more things as you do the Aveda. The whole Metzias of the Sfiras. Nishava the Aveda Sada. Comes through the creation of the person. Now 1 second. The Sfiras existed way before me and you came to this world. Afsha Sfiras Yigam Lifnei Abriya. They weren't just before me and you. They were before the creation. Umizem Muvan Shal Yedei Aveda Sada Nasel Inyan Gam Lifnei Aveda Kebifnim. So from this, you understand that what I'm saying is true. The Aveda that we do now has a retroactive power. It's creating the Metzias of the thing as it existed before we did the Aveda. Okay, what's the mechanics of that? How does that work? So here the Rebbe brings in another famous Torah of the Maggid. when the Eibishter said we're going to make a person in our image. There's no image. The Eibishter doesn't have an image. Which image? Which pre-existing image is the Eibishter copying over here? So the Maggid explains that the Eibishter wasn't saying we're making person b'tzalmeinu in the form of the Eibishter. B'tzalmeinu means the tzelem which we already have reserved. There's an image of Yidden which exists even before the Yidden were created. Shu k'mashal adam sheyesh le ben. It's like a person who has a son, shemitzad gedel avasei love. Nechke kotzuras haben b'machshavtei, because of the great love the father has to the child. The image of the baby is ingrained into his mind. So with human beings, it's only after. Of course, you can only have the child, then you see the baby's form, and then it's ingrained in your mind. But by the Eibishter, umikevan she'etzli yizbarich aver ve'osid echad, past and present or future, lachin nechke katzurasam shal Yisrael, k'meishen neshamis Yisrael in b'vchinas nivra, v'yisteira mizeh k'meishen yerdas lamata, b'machshavtei yizbarich gam kedem shenivru. The form of the Yidden, as the neshamis are a nivra, and as the neshamis came down lamata and took form of a physical body, that tzura of that Yid and all Yidden is engraved in the Eibishter's machshava before they were created. That also happens to be the meaning of the Medrash. Brought down in two places. That who did the Eibishter consult before creating the world? He consulted the neshamas of tzaddikim. What does that mean? The avodah of tzaddikim. The fact that it became known to the Eibishter that he is going to have pleasure from Tzaddikim's Aveda, that pleasure was experienced by the Eibishter before the creation, and that pleasure was what set the creation into motion. This is the meaning. This is the meaning that even before creation there was these world supports. Of course, there was no physical Torah, there was no physical Aveda, there was no physical Gemach, there was no physical Yid doing physical things. But they had to have existed as a motivator for creation. Because the Eibishter contracted himself into the Tzelem of the Yid, it became Tzalmeinu. Yeah? The Yid was formed in the image of the Tzalmeinu of the Yid, which already existed in the Eibishter's thought from before. So what happened was, through the Aveda of Yidden, which is coming later, Sheheim, Gimel HaKavin Chagas, which can be generalized as the three Kavin of Chesed Gvura Tiferes, as the Tzemach Tzedek writes. The Gimel HaInyan Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh, as the Rashba writes, told you before, the Rashba says Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh. So the Yidden's Aveda, when you consider it on a more general level, is the three Kavim, is the three Inyanim Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh. Nasa Lemaila Oid Lifnei Abriya Hatzir de Chagas Uda Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh. So because of that, retroactively was created before the creation this Tzir of Chesed Gvura Tiferes and Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh, which is required as a precursor to creation. And then the worlds were created. And the Rebbe finds this word also in the Hemshech Nun Aleph from the Rebbe Rashab in 38. Yeah. Re'ei ba'arucha hemshech chagal shvuos tafish nun aleph karav l'seifei tezeh ma she'amidas v'kiyum ha'elam hu al gimel dvarim eilu hu lefi she'hishavos kol ha'elam esim gimel ha'kavin chagas. The fact that the world is supported on these three things is because the world was created with chagas. So the Rebbe Rashab links chagas to the three amudim. Here the Rebbe is saying one brought about the other. The tzir of chagas, which was the precursor to creation of Ishtalshalos, came about because of the Aveda of Yidden today that we're doing now, created L'mafreya before the creation, the motivation for chagas. Uvelukot Teirah Sham, the Alter Rebbe says, Shegimul Amudim Shema Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh K'neged Gimul Elam Mizbiyah. That the three amudim, doesn't use the word chagas, but they're Machshava Dibur U'Maaseh are the base for B'riyat Tzir Asiyah, the end of Ishtalshalos. Same thing. These three kavim brought about those three kavim, and the Rebbe is saying it works backwards also. The Torah Aveda Gmach, which we do now, is what causes Lamaila this Indian to exist before. So the Rebbe's, again, bombshell, chidush over here is that the Gimel Amudim Shalei Ma'elam Eimed had to exist, had to accompany the world at all times, even before creation, and that's because of the power of the Aveda of the Yid. The Aveda of the Yid dictates L'mafreya the inspiration for the Eibusher to create the world. And that inspiration was the original form of the Gimel Amudim. Chagas was the more abstract version of Torah Avedim Mos Chasadim. But there's more to the puzzle, and that's Sif Dalet. Because based on what we have now, one could say that when I actually do what I do in Torah Avedim Gmach, nothing new is being accomplished. Because what did Torah Avedim Gmach of the Yid accomplish? The beginning, the Chagas, which motivated creation. So when I do it b'Podoh, I'm just kind of reliving that experience, or recreating that experience. So the Rebbe adds that no, the way your Torah v'Avodah Gmach inspired the creation of the world, the way it existed Lifnei Abriya, is be'ein areich to what you're going to create now that you actually do it b'Podoh. And the Rebbe will spend quite a considerable amount of time in the coming Eisios on this Nekuda. Elo sha'afal pikein, nevertheless, says the Rebbe, ho'inyonim shenasim l'mayla de Aveda di Yisrael lifnei Aveda. Whatever was accomplished l'mayla, through the Aveda of Yidden that's happening now, whatever was accomplished retroactively before the Aveda took place, einam ba'osei ha'ilui k'may shehem la'achrei Aveda, are totally not on the same level as the way they are after the Aveda is actually done. And here the Rebbe brings up a very famous concept. So famous, in fact, that every Bar Mitzvah Bacher says it by his Bar Mitzvah. The first piece of chiddush that most kids learn, Bar Mitzvah Maamar. It's known. The taich of the pasuk that we say every day in davening, the Eibusher tells his words to Yaakov, he gives his statutes and his laws to Israel. The Medrash explains, Yerushalmi explains, that the pshat of dvarav, chukav, mishpatav, what does it mean? He tells over his words, his mitzvahs, his chukim. The Eibusher does the mitzvahs. And these mitzvahs that he does, he gives over to the Yidden. The Rebbe in Ara 40 quotes the Medrash in Shmos, Mashu hu oiseh, hu eimer li Yisrael lases. Yeah, what the Eibusher does, he tells Yidden to do. And there's a similar expression in the Yerushalmi and Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe says, when we say that the Eibusher does mitzvahs, and those are the mitzvahs which he gives us, sheyesh b'zeh beis inyanim. There's two elements to this point. Inyan ha'alef u, the first inyan is, kedrashas Chazal al pasuk mashu oiseh eimer li Yisrael lases. Like the drasha of Chazal on this pasuk, that what the Eibusher does, that's what he tells Yidden to do. Hainu shebitchila HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekayim asa mitzvahs, v'zeh neisen kayach li Yisrael sheikayim asa mitzvahs. First the Eibusher does the mitzvahs, then that gives the power to the Yidden to do the mitzvahs. First comes the inspiration from above, the Eibusher's kiyam mitzvahs, then comes our Isus Dil Zata. But then there's a second element. Actually the opposite. Through Yidden doing the mitzvahs, that is what sparks l'mayla that the Eibusher should be mekayim the mitzvahs. The awakening from above, which follows the awakening from below. Now, of those two inyanim, the inyan zeh should be mitzvahs HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shenas al yedei kiyum ha-mitzvahs di Yisrael. This element, this second element in the Eibusher's mitzvahs, the one that's caused through the mitzvahs of Yidden, hu na leyeser mikiyum ha-mitzvahs HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'mei shu mitzad atzmei, is of course greater than the fulfillment of the mitzvahs which the Eibusher does on his own before. Ve'al derech isrus d'le'ela shal yedei isrus d'l'sata she'ina l'syeser misrus d'le'ela shlifnei isrus d'l'sata. As with the parallel. The parallel is awakening from above, awakening from below. When the awakening from above follows the awakening from below, it's that much more valuable than when there's just an inspiration, stamazeh from above. So, just before we get to the point that the Rebbe wants to draw from this to our inyan, let's just look at some of the artists here. In 41, two inyanim in the Maamar Nazal, the Rebbe points to Basi Ligani, the first Basi Ligani in Tafshin Yud Aleph. Over there in Sivav, the Rebbe over there says that everything that the Frierdiker Rebbe demanded from us, and all the other Nesiim, they all did it themselves. Al derech drashas Razal never brings on the pasuk Magid Varad Agach Yisrael that Mashu Hu Eise Hu Emer Li Yisrael Lases V'Lishmer V'chein Mashu Hu Mitzava Li Yisrael Hu Eise. That Rebbe brings both Lashenis. What the Eibishter does, he tells Yidden to do, and what he commands the Yidden, he does. That's the second Inyan. First he commands the Yidden do it, then he does it. Al derech zeh with the Nesiim, that whatever they gave to the Mikasharim, they did it first. So over there, there's Ha'ara Yudalit. And the Rebbe is Mitzayin on the first element, on the first Inyan. Mashu Eis Emel Yisrael Lasis is Mitzayin to Shmeis Rabbah, and Yerushalmi Rashon, and he's Mitzayin over here. And the Rebbe says, V'zehu Yisrael Dile'ela Shekodma Yisrael Dilasata. That's the inspiration from above that comes before the inspiration from below. Kiddeshanu b'mitzvaysav. The Eibishter first sanctified us with his mitzvahs. The achar kach, and there's a second inyan. Kol ha'sheina kadosh baruch hu sheina kenegdei. Different Maamar Chazal. Matter of fact, this Maamar Chazal, Kol ha'sheina, the Rebbe quotes in the recording. It's not in the Mugad Maamar, but in the recording when the Rebbe was talking about Yidden being Geirim as the Eibishter should do mitzvahs, he quoted this Maamar Chazal. Kol ha'sheina, when a Yid learns Torah, the Eibishter in response learns Torah opposite him. Tzitzis shalamata, ma'irim tzitzis shalamayla, b'teisvus eris, etc. B'yisrus dilasata, yisrus dileila. First, the lower awakening, then the upper awakening. V'zel mashkasa b'fnim, v'chein mashahu. That's why I write in the Maamar both expressions. What the Eibishter does, tells us to do, and whatever he tells us to do, he does. Because there's two in Yonim. So that's already, from the Rebbe's first Maamar, you see these two in Yonim. In 42, interesting, the Rebbe brings from a bunch of Makaitis, for the second Nekuda, that we elicit the Eibishter's mitzvahs through our doing mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says, "V'tafir sham achvav sham shezehu hapirush b'Maamar Razal shebara 40." In Samach Vav, at the very end, in the Maamar Kayamar Hashem Lebrisi Tafir Samach Zayin, the Rebbe Rashab brings the Maamar Chazal Mashu Eisem Yisrael Lases, and I put the quote down over here. The Rebbe Rashab says, "V'yodua hapirush b'zeh." What does it mean? Mashu Oiseh or Emer Yisrael Lases. The Mashu Oiseh zehu al yedei shemitzav Yisrael Lases. That which the Eibishter does mitzvahs is because he gave him to the Yidden to do. So it's a unique approach to that Gemara, to that Medrash. Pashas, we understand that that's the source for the first Inyan. The Eibishter does it, tells us to do it. The Rebbe Rashab is saying, no, you can also read that a different way. The fact that the Eibishter does mitzvahs is because he gave it over to us to do. In other words, it's in response to our fulfillment of the mitzvahs. Anyway, what does the Rebbe want from this? There's two Yanim in mitzvahs, yeah? Eibishter does it before, Eibishter does it after. When the Eibishter does it after, it's greater than when he does it before. So now the Rebbe says, back to the Pnim, Ukemoi shaham mitzvahs HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shenasim al yedei sheYisrael mekayim misa mitzvahs. The same way when you compare both types of mitzvahs, the mitzvahs before and the mitzvahs after, which is greater, the one that David does in response to our Aveda. Al derech zeh yesh leimar b'ha mitzvahs HaKadosh Baruch Hu shenasim al yedei kiyum ha-mitzvahs d'Yisrael gufa. Al derech zeh you can split two categories in the mitzvahs that the Eibishter does in response to us. Because based on what we said in the last Sif, we understand that any hamshacha that exists l'mayla exists even before we do the Aveda as a response to our Aveda. So even the second element, the fact that the Eibishter does mitzvahs after our Yisrus Dilasata, exists before we actually make the Yisrus Dilasata. Yet, when we actually make the Yisrus Dilasata, now the response takes on an even greater measure. As the Rebbe says, the mitzvahs of the Eibishter which come after the Yidden do the mitzvahs actually, they're greater than the mitzvahs of the Eibishter, not the mitzvahs of the Eibishter, the first category, the mitzvahs of the Eibishter that are created through the mitzvahs of us. But the first category, the one that happens, the one that exists the way we do, the way even before we do it. Even before we Mekayim the mitzvah, that second inyan is already Kayam. Elamai takes on a whole new form, a whole new Geder, a whole new Chidush, a whole new Iloi in the Rebbe's Lashon over here, a whole new greatness when we actually do it and in response to that, the Eibishter actually does it. And here the Rebbe goes into a fascinating nekuda. Sifei. Ubazeh yuvan ma she'amar Razal ala pasuk vaye'erev vayiveker yom hashishi. Revolutionary pshat in the Gemara. The Gemara says in two places, in Shabbos and Avodah Zarah. Now, what does it mean by Ye'erev vayiveker yom hashishi? Why does it say hashishi? All the other creation says yom echad, yom sheni, yom shlishi, the sixth day. The sixth day sounds like there's like a special sixth day. So the Gemara says, sheyom hashishi d'maaseh bereishis, that the sixth day of creation. Skip the brackets for a second. The sixth day of creation, tolui b'yom hashishi d'sivan shebay nitna Torah, is depending on, is hanging in the balance, based on another sixth day, the sixth day of Sivan on which Torah was given. Ki hisna kadosh baruch hu ma'aseh bereishis chulu, because they made a condition. Im Yisrael mekabel ma'Torah, oz dafka atem miskayim chulu. If the Yidden accept the Torah, that's when you're going to exist. So why does it say Yom Hashishi? Because the Yom Hashishi here in Bereishis is depending on the Yom Hashishi b'Sivan. And the truth is that not just Yom Hashishi is depending on Shishi b'Sivan. The whole Ma'aseh Bereishis is dependent on Shishi b'Sivan. So that's the Rebbe adds in the Sugrayim. Let's go back for a second. She'ikar inyan Ma'aseh Bereishis will be Yom Hashishi. The reason that we're calling it Yom Hashishi is the dependent one, is because that's the focal point of creation. Yom Brei Adam Arisha. All the Maamar are full of it. What do you mean Zayim Tchilas Ma'asecha? The Eibishter began to create the world Chafei Elul, not Rosh Hashanah. Elamai, it's the main point. The Iker was Yom Vav. So when the Gemara says that Yom Hashishi d'Maaseh Bereishis is hanging on Yom Hashishi d'Sivan, it means the entire Maaseh Bereishis, of which the main day is the Yom Hashishi. And the Rebbe just sticks in, Val Derech Zeh Gam B'Negel Yitzkislev. Reish Hashanah l'Teres Achsidus or V'Darkei Achsidus Shezeh Hayom Tchilas Ma'asecha Shleimus HaKavana Ha'amitis B'Bri Asada. This day, the new year of Chassidus and the ways of Chassidus, is the beginning of the Eibishter's creation. In other words, in the sense that it was the completion of the true Kavanah and the creation of man. This is a quote from the Rebbe Rashav's famous letter from Tafir Samach Beis, that the Rebbe quotes in R49, that one year that the Rebbe Rashav was in Lubavitch, Yitzis Kislev, and the Chassidim were very sad, and he sent a letter. I feel like I read it out loud, and it was a big shturim that year. And b'schuzeh we actually had the letter, which the Rebbe brings in Hakdamat HaYom Yom. So this Kislev was also the Shleimus. Okay, but that's not the main point. The main point over here is that Yom Hashishi d'Maaseh Bereishis is the focal point, is the Iker of creation, and therefore it's possible to say that Yom Shishi here is hanging on Yom Shishi there. Okay, the Eibishter made a condition. So now, how do you understand this condition? The Pashtos, where the Mefarshim explain it, is that Taka, in the moment of creation, there was a doubt. The whole, for the next 2,448 years, since B'riyas Ha'olam, the world was teetering on the brink of extinction. Because perhaps, the Lashon is, Shema lo yekablua. Maybe, the Yidden are not going to take the Torah. And if they don't, the ganze Maisa is going to be batul me'ikare. But that, it's more of a nigladik pshat. It's one thing. Because Klape Shmaya Galia, the Eibishter knew that the Yidden are going to be Mekabel the Torah. So what kind of a Tanai is this? I'm hanging the Bria on the Kabbalah Torah. You know there's going to be Kabbalah Torah. So then that means that to begin with, there's no weakness. The Tanai implies weakness. Yeah, there's a weakness in creation till Yom Shishi, confirms, good creation. But if the Eibishter knew that Torah is going to be given and Yidden are going to accept it, so there's no weakness to begin with. But the Gemara is mashma that the Tanai was a real Tanai and there was a weakness till the Kabbalah Torah. So the Rebbe says, based on this verse, it's very understood. The fact that the Torah is hanging, is depending, the sixth day of creation, on the sixth day of Sivan, mashma implies the fact that on Shishi b'Sivan there became a kiyum, there was a stempel, Ma'aseh Bereishis got a finality of existence. Wasn't only because there was a doubt on earth, maybe they're not going to take the Torah. As the Rebbe brings in 52 from the other Gemara. Yeah, we say until them Eretz Yara v'Shakata. The world was fearful and then it was quiet. Fearful and quiet are contradictions. The Gemara says, first it was afraid, then it was quiet. Yeah, but that's only klapi the earth. The earth was talking in doubt because the earth didn't know whether you're going to take it. But the Pashto Pshat in the Gemara that aliba the emes, the whole kiyum of Ma'aser Bereishis was hanging in the balance till Yom Shishi B'Sivan, means that on Shishi B'Sivan there came a teikef in creation elagam lefi ha'emes, kefi sheklapish ma'yagalya gam mikedem sheyisol yikabas ha'teira. Even from the lens of truth, the way it was revealed by the Eibishter from before, that you're not going to be Mekabel the Teira. V'yesh lahisif, the Rebbe even adds, shtikla halachic vart, very geschmack vart. The Mikevan she'im Yisrael Mekabel Mesateira Tanai b'Ma'aser Bereishis, since the stipulation of the Yidden taking the Teira is a condition, a precondition to creation. Haregam k'sheyadua mikedem sheyiskayim atanai hatekef da'amaiso k'sheyiskayim atanai b'peil. Even if we know that the Tanai is going to have to be fulfilled, the power of the Maisa only comes into play when the Tanai is actually fulfilled. This is maybe a side inyan. Let's get into it now for a second. Then we'll go back to the main point in 53. That ever brings a dugman halacha, where even a human being, there is a time when a human being can have 100% certainty that a condition will be fulfilled, and yet the halachic status that the condition brings into effect only goes into effect when the condition is actually fulfilled. What's the example? That brings from the Rambam. Hilchos Gershon, Pektas Lach Yud Aleph. A man tells his wife, "Hareze gitich mi'achshav im lebasi mikan v'ad 12 chodesh." I'm giving you a get. The get is going into effect right now if I don't show up in 12 months. And then he goes on a trip. So the pashtos, we wait the 12 months, and if Hitaka doesn't come back, then it's a get. But all 12 months, we don't actually know if he's going to come back or not. But what if we do know? Meis b'seichid beis chodesh. What if he dies in the middle of 12 months? He's dead, he's in the ground, 6 feet under. There's no way he's coming back after 12 months. Afal pisha e efshar sheyav, the Rambam says, even though it's impossible for him to come, there's no way for the Tanai to be undone. She cannot get married until after 12 months when the Tanai is fulfilled. On the day when 12 months is there and then he doesn't come, now she's divorced. What do you mean? 6 months ago he passed away. We buried him, made a levaya. He's not coming 6 months. No. In halacha, when there's a Tanai, the Tanai has to be miskayim b'peil, as the Maggid Mishnah explains, that it brings. Even though it's impossible. Even as humans, we can predict with 100% certainty that the Tanai can never become cancelled. The guy's dead. He's not coming. She's not permitted to her husband. We can't consider her legally to be a divorcee until the Tanai is actually mekuyim. So applying that to creation, even if the Eibishter knows, in creation, that I think you're not going to be mekayim the Tanai, but the chalois shebazeh can only be chal once the Gidon are actually mekayim the Tanai b'peil. So that's like a halachic haisafa to the Indian. But back to the core union, the Rebbe is saying, if the Gemara is toilet one on the other, it's toilet also lefi ha'emes. What was the kiyum? What was added on Yom Shishi B'Sivan that didn't exist before? If I knew before, all along, they're going to take the Torah, so what, vas kum tzu, when they actually take the Torah? This that we said before, that you can't compare things before the Aveda to things after the Aveda. The af shegam inyan zeh, back in the Maamar. The af shegam inyan zeh, ma sheYisrael kibla satera b'peil, nasa etzli yizbarich gam b'tchila. So even though this inyan, that the Yidden also took a Torah b'peil mamish, was already there by the Eibishter to begin with. Harei noisaf lazeh. So first of all, she'inyan zeh hu rak mitzad l'mayla, mikevon she'etzli yizbarich ha'aver v'ha'asid echad, ma she'inkin b'ha'olam lo inyan zeh. Okay, so first of all, you can get away with a more simple answer. You don't need this whole Maamar over here. Fine. Mitzad l'mayla, there was that inyan. The Eibishter could see the future in the past, but in Welt it wasn't ufketan. And for in Welt to be ufketan, that's a chashav v'zak. Shlechein lehoya teikef l'kiyum ha'ilam ad yom hashishi b'sivan. Therefore, there can be no takeoff to the Kiyam of Welt till the 6th day in Sivan. Fine. But more than that, and deeper than that, based on our Maamar, when Tapodoh do Plachu, when it actually happened, and the Yidden actually took the Torah and Ilam Hazeh Agashmi, Nase Ilui Nale Yeser Gam Beho'inin the Kabbalah Satera Kamei Shiva Machshavte Yisbarach Lifnei Abriya. That creates a greatness within the inyan of Kabbalah Satira, which existed in the Eibishter's Machshava already before creation. Because even if something exists before the Avodah, and it does, you can't compare it to the Ili which comes after the Avodah. And that was the Kiyum, Vasatsuga when the Yidden actually accepted the Torah. Okay, there's a couple of artists over here, but let's see them for a second. 54 is in the Rebbe's first Vart, the Vart that in Welt didn't exist. So the Rebbe says, Real derech zelekut asichas chelik yutes, a similar Vart is expressed over there. The Mikevan shekavanas habriya b'shvil ha-Torah, hine al yedei zeh gufa nasa kein ba'abriya shekol mitziyusa hi Torah. If the Eibishter's intent in creation was for Torah, so that de facto makes the situation in the world that its entire mitzvah is Torah. Because there is no potential, that actual, in the Eibishter's eyes. That's not so great because that's only mitzad the Eibishter. Welt doesn't recognize that reality. So that Vart sounds very much like this Vart that we're saying over here. That the inyan that the Eibishter knew the Yidden are going to be Mekabel Torah, and the kiyum of Maamar the Rebbe which comes along with that was only mitzad l'mayla because the Eibishter has past, present, future together. But mitzad the Welt, it wasn't that inyan. But the Rebbe is mechalik weiter. Ela shebelukut esichas sham medubar be'inyan ha'pu'ula ba'olam shenasa mitzad ha'kavana shel l'mayla. והאביר שבפנים הוא שגם הוא עניין שנעשה מקדם על ידי קבלת התורה בפועל בעולם הזה הגשמי, גם עניין זה הוא רק מצד למעלה ולא בנגיע להועילה. The Sikha and the Maamar are speaking about two different things. The Sikha is talking about the top-down Pu'ula in Welt. And in the top-down Pu'ula in Welt, you could have it top-down, you could have it bottom-up. You could have it only mitzad l'mayla, or the Welt can also recognize that Pu'ula which the Kavanah shel l'mayla has. Here we're talking about the bottom-up. Here we're talking about the Pu'ula in Welt that happens when we're Mekabel the Torah. And in that we're making two categories. The fact that there could be a bottom-up mitzad l'mayla, so the Eibishter Avav V'asid Echad, and then you can have the final umph, which is a bottom-up, sheva bottom-up. When we actually do b'poyel, that which we have to do b'poyel to make the kiyum and ma'aseh b'reishis. So I think this part just brings out the extent of what we're saying. And then the Rebbe goes past that with his answer over here. That the kiyum shel achar aveda is greater than the kiyum shelifnei aveda. Okay, in 55, the Rebbe adds to the word of in Welt there wasn't this inyan. That's in the Gemara. There was a doubt whether they're not going to accept it. In other words, that means that it wasn't ufkitan in Welt. If it was, the world wouldn't be in doubt. But based on his deeper word, the Rebbe adds another knech in the Gemara. 56. Val pizei yumtak zesh ha'inyan shehisna kadosh baruch hu ma'aseh b'reishis. Im Yisrael mekabel matera ramaz hakosuv behei yiseda d'yem hashishi. Yeah, I told you before that the drasha the Gemara is making is because it says Yem Hashishi. Every day it says Yem Sheni, Yem Shlishi, etc. Here it says Yem Hashishi. The extra hay. So where does the Torah choose to communicate the kiyum that Yidden Tu'uf and Welt in the extra hay of Shishi B'Siva? The Lechura, you read the Gemara at first glance, it doesn't make sense. Aleph, Maya Shaykhis to Hisnak Baruch Hu Ma'aseh B'reishis, Kol Ma'aseh B'reishis, Le'em Hashishi Dafka. Say it somewhere else. Why? There must be a reason why it's coming out in the sixth day. The whole B'reishis, the whole Ma'aseh B'reishis is hanging on Matan Torah. So why is it connected to day 6? And Bey is Arei Atnaihu Im Yisrael Mekabel Matera. U'man Agia Kanch Le'em Hashishi B'Sivan. Who actually cares about the 6-6 correlation? It's not the 6 that's great into the kiyum. It's the fact that either we're Mekabel Torah. And if they're Mekabel Torah on Hey Sivan or on Yud Zayin Sivan, it would have made a difference. What's the Hadgasha of Shishi B'Sivan over here? So the Rebbe says, V'yesh leimar the bazeh shetola hateikef the ma'aseh b'reishis b'yem Shishi B'Sivan dafka, by linking this b'reishis to Matan Torah and expressing the linkage with those words Yem Shishi B'Sivan madgish. The Gemara is stressing this nekuda. Even though the Kabbalah Satira existed before. First of all, he knew in advance that they're going to accept it, and also because they're going to accept it, it actually exists now. Those words 6 Sivan represent to us the practical Kabbalah Satira. The Eibishter wasn't waiting for Kabbalah Satira as a musag. That existed already before. The Eibishter was waiting for Kabbalah Satira b'shishi b'sivan, the one that took the form of a physical Kabbalah Satira. That's what made the real Kiyum in Maaseh Bereishis. What does that have to do with 6? Since in the practical order of things, the Eibishter's first creation was out of chesed, even if it was motivated by Yidden Zaveda, but Pil Mamish, the first Bria was out of kindness. And the whole idea of the power of Yisros Dil Sata came about when the human being was created. That's the only day when you can bring out this greatness. When you have the potential for the greatness of creation, when the human being exists and now the power of Yisros Dil Sata exists, that's when you can bring out the greatness of Shishi B'Sivan, the greatness of Kabbalah State of Apel Mamish over Kabbalah State of potential. So long as the mile of awakening from below doesn't exist yet, as long as there's no human being yet, Kolzman it's not Yim Shishi L'Maaseh Bereishis, you can't really be Toile Kiyum of Maaseh Bereishis in Kabbalah Satira, because that Kabbalah State already exists before. You're looking for the Kabbalah Satira of Apel Mamish. You can only say that when you're in a world where Apel Mamish matters. And that's after day 6. Ubemela, it's mamish yumtak, why the Gemara says that it's shishi l'maaseh bereishis, shishi b'sivan, because it's those two things which make up the toichin of the greatness of the message which is being communicated over here. Now the Rebbe hasn't yet explained what is that ilui. Yeah? What is that ilui of the Yidden Zaveda that happens with Pil Mamish over and above the ilui of how it existed before? That's going to be Sivav. Says the Rebbe, what is Taka, this Eloi? What is the Eloi of a Yid's Aveda as it takes place, B'Pil Mamish, over the Eloi of the Aveda as it takes place in potential or retroactively because of the Aveda which is going to happen later? So here the Rebbe borrows a Nekuda which actually he spoke about earlier this year, Tafshel Ches, a few weeks before. The Rebbe said the famous Maamar Rabbi. Maamar the Rebbe the Rebbe speaks about the union of neshamas, how they exist before and how they exist after the Yirida Lamata. So the Rebbe says, "Commission is Bar Le'il b'Dibram Aschal Maamar Rabbi. B'inyan ha'aliyah ha'nasis b'haneshamas ha'yidei Yiridasan Lamata Dafka." We spoke before about the aliyah which come to the neshama, Dafka through them coming down to this world. Afshagam lifnei zeh hayu mushrashis ba'atzmusi yizbarechu b'hem nimlach. They were already in Atzmus. The Rebbe was already consulting with them. What do they have to have a journey to this world? So the Maamar over there explains, and just follow what's happening over here. The Rebbe is about to show us this exact thought in the micro, zooming into neshamas, and he's showing you how neshamas have the same challenge. Yeah, they exist before, and yet they have to come down for something new. What's the something new by neshamas? From that we can zoom out and say that's the same something new for the entirety of the world, vis-a-vis the Yidden who are doing the Aveda in the world. So what do we say about neshamas? We say about neshamas should be yesan b'vchinas ha'amlachin b'vchinas tzadikim. Kidiyu kalashin b'minim lach b'nishmeisem shel tzadikim. When they existed in Atzmos, when they were being consulted, they were on the level of a tzaddik. The lashon is actually b'nishmeisem shel tzadikim. Va'idei Aveda the Torah mitzvahs b'peil b'ridasan lemata nasim b'dargas b'alei tshuva. Only through serving the Eibusher and Torah mitzvahs in this world b'peil can you become b'alei tshuva. Inyan v'haruach tashuv l'alikim shenisan, not tshuva necessarily for avedas. The idea of tshuva, of being in a state where you're separate from the Eibusher and coming back. The spirit of the neshama coming back to the Eibusher which put it in originally. Which is bar barucha b'da'anal. So the Rebbe says if that's true of neshamas, if the tachlis hakavana of the neshama coming down to this world is to fix the guf, to fix the nefesh habamis, and to fix a portion in the world, yesh leimar shegam ha'pa'ula ba'elam b'haguf b'nefesh habamis or b'chalke ba'elam b'ad b'klalos ha'elam shenas al yedei avedas neshama hu inyan hatshuva. What is it that the neshama achieves outside of itself? First, you have the neshama vis-a-vis itself. Why did I come down? I came down to be a Bal Tshuva, but I also came down to make the world to make the world Balei Tshuva, to accomplish or to bring the inyan of Tshuva to Welt. aliyas kol habirurim b'vchinas erchezer d'tshuva. That all the refined clarity that's been created out of the avodas habirurim should come back to the Eibusher b'vchinas tshuva. V'adarabba, tachlis hakavana b'didas haneshama lemata hu lei b'shvilo ili d'tshuva shenasa b'haneshama ki im b'chdei lifel birur v'alas hanitzutas d'tshuva eilam inyan hatshuva d'eilam v'ulemayla yeser m'hatshuva d'neshama. Perhaps one can say, and the Rebbe is saying it as a fact, that the reason why the neshama came down is not so much for the aliyah which is going to happen to itself, but for the aliyah that it's going to create in the world around it. That birur, that halah, that tshuva in Welt, which is a higher level of tshuva than the tshuva of the neshama itself. As the Rebbe is going to explain, or already explained actually by that time, in the Maamar V'Shafti, the longest Maamar of the Rebbe, also Mugan in Melukat Beis. This nekuda of the tshuva of Welt being greater than the tshuva of the neshama. So this is, Sivav is, what is that Ilui? In other words, we said that the Gimel Kavan existed before the Aveda, because they're the Gimel Amudim. What form do they take? The Tzir of Chagas, which results based on the Aveda of Yidden. Nevertheless, there's an Ilui when you actually do it. What's the Ilui when you actually do it? Tshuva, because the way the Tzir of Chagas, the way the Gimel Amudim existed before, is in a way of tzaddikim. They haven't yet been separated, challenged, and brought back. But now when they're actually involved, now they're actually brought back. It's a whole new journey. It's a whole new uftu. And that's the chidush, that's the ilui, which the Yidden accomplish after the Aveda. Now before going back to the main topic, the Rebbe is going to connect this to two Titus of the Magid on a pasuk which was from that week's parsha. Vayeshev. And I think the Rebbe makes a big deal out of the Magid because he's the Balei Lula, as he actually says. And for this, I think it's just kedai to take a second to actually take a look at the Titus of the Magid. This is in the Kutta Torah, in Er Torah. Not Alter Rebbe's Kutta Torah, the Magid's the Kutta Torah. And in the beginning of Vayeshev, the Magid brings down like this. This is Ois Mem Ches. Okay, it goes in order of Asias. And Ois Mem Ches, he says like this. The pasuk says, Vayeshev Yaakov beretz Meguriyav beretz Canaan. The remez of this is that the person is in Elam Hazeh to do what the Eibishter wants. Yela'avdo l'shamra. U'lekamon be'ezras Hashem, keywords. Later, we're going to explain to you the mashal for this. A tzaddik who does his work faithfully, right? He comes to the world to do this Aveda. He does his work faithfully. Does what he has to do. V'zeu vayeshev. That's what it means, vayeshev. Ein vayeshev el lashon hakava. Vayeshev means being held back. As so long as a tzaddik is held back in Elam Hazeh, he stays bidvekos. Even if he's be'eretz, in artzios, v'chumrios, he stays b'megurei aviv. And he translates Megurei as Yira. Yiras Aviv Shabashamayim. Even if he's in the land of Canaan, Canaan is Moiznei Mirma, he sticks to his guns. That's the first way that the Magid explains the pasuk. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz. Even when Yaakov is being held back in a Erdische land, he stays Megurei Aviv. Even if he's be'eretz Canaan. When the Rebbe said this in the recording, you hear him like, I had the lashon over here. Vas hata Yaakov. What's a Yaakov doing in Eretz? But even if he's in Eretz, he stays in Megurei Aviv, he stays in the fear of the Eibishter. Okay? Then a whole arichas, a whole bunch of more pirushim. Later on, in Ois Nun Aleph, the Magid says, V'hinei ksiv, Vayeshev Yaakov beretz Megurei Aviv beretz Canaan, Ubi'arnu le'el haremes. I gave you the remes before, in Ois Mem Ches. The remes is, again, a tzaddik, even if he's down in the world, he'll stick to his Yiras Hashem. There's another pshat that the Torah is explaining why did Yaakov go to Eretz. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz. Why does the neshama come down mimadregasei ha'elyena me'ed? V'leishev be'eretz be'artzios. Okay, maybe that line from the recording actually applies here more. Was hata Yaakov zolatan in Eretz? Why is Yaakov living in this land? Lekach Amar Megurei Aviv. Megurei Lashon Asifo Knisa. To gather in. There's a gathering. There's something we have to be doing in this world. Kol kavanas hatzadik b'olam hazeh is leger v'lesef hanitzutzos hakdoshim ulachnisam ulahaloisam le'ela. The entire kavanah of the tzaddik in this world is to gather in the nitzutzos, the holy sparks, and to bring them in. And that's Meguri Avim. And he goes on a very long mashal. Nothing to do with the Maamar, but I just figured it's a beautiful mashal. It says you have a king who lost a jewel. And many of his servants, Sarav, Apartamim, Apaches, Usganim, Anshim, Lechamte, there's infinite number of people that are standing over there. Everybody could look for the jewel that's lost. But the king doesn't give them the command. He tells his son, you go look for the gem. He can trust all of his ministers that if they'll find the jewel, they'll return it to him. Doesn't matter. The Eibishter wants to be Mezakeh the Yid, his precious son. The king, in the Mashal, wants to be Mezakeh his precious son. And he wants the Mitzvah to be labeled his. The prince found the jewel. Maybe the king knows where the jewel is. He just hints to the son, go find there, hot and cold, you're warm, you're getting warmer. So he should know where it is. All again, to be Mezakeh b'nei Chavivai. And to say that the king could later boast, look, there was nobody else who can find it except for my son. So the Rebbe says, the Maggid says, Anim shel Muvan, yeah? The Eibishter created the entire world to be Mevarer Nitzutzos. The Yidden should be Mevarer Nitzutzos. The lost jewel, the lost sparks. And the Eibishter gives us Remazim, tells us where to find the Nitzutzos. And he doesn't give the Malachim the chance. They could do it. If they do it, they would be Mevarer in all the Nitzutzos. But he wants to be called Hashem the Yid. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megudei aviv. Why is a Yid in Eretz? Because he needs to gather in stuff for his father. He needs to gather in the Nitzutzos for the Eibishter. So that's the Maggid. Now, notice that the Maggid brings first the Pirush of Megudei Lashon Yira. Tzaddik stays in Begiras Hashem. Then he brings the Pirush of Megudei Lashon, bringing in the Avodas HaBirurim. But, like I said before, already in the beginning, even before he gives Megudei Lashon Yira, he says, Ulekamun be'ezras Hashem. Later, I'm going to give you a second shot. So the Rebbe is going to be Medayik in every one of these parts of the Teres HaMaggid. The Rebbe is actually going to quote first the second Pirush, then the first one, as we'll see. Zayin. Let's connect this whole Maamar that we're talking about till now to the Torah of the Maggid and the pasuk, the first pasuk of this week's parsha, that week. Says the Maggid, the fact that Yaakov came down from his high madrega to go into Eretz, Artzius, Hainu, which basically is a metaphor for Yeridas and Hashem Lamata, general, not just Yaakov, every person Hashem came down to the world. To the point of Vayeshev is being held back, etc. It's again the second Pirush. It's from Megurei Aviv, to gather in. Like the pasuk, Eiger Bakait, he gathers in. The job of the Yid is to gather in, to bring together all the holy sparks in this world, and to bring them up. The Rebbe goes back now. In the beginning, earlier, a few ACS before, the Maggid says like this. Separate Pirush. Megurei Aviv actually means fear of the Father in heaven. Megurei carrying the taich of fear. And then it brings in 69 from the Zohar. My Megurei Aviv, Kamadat Amar Magar Misaviv, as we say in the Navi. Fear came from around. The Kol Yoimai Havadochil. All of his days he was afraid. So the Maggid's pshat is rooted in the Zohar. Upirush Vayeshev Yaakov Beretz Megurei Aviv Gomer, who the pshat of the pasuk is the Hagam Shu Be'eretz Ba'artzius V'chumni Selam Haza. Even if the tzaddik finds himself in land, in earthliness, in coarseness of this world, V'Yisera Mizu Shebelam Haza Gufu Be'eretz Canaan. Not just anywhere in the world. He's in Canaan. Moshe Canaan B'Yadei Meizne Mirma. Canaan is the businessman who represents scales of falsehood, of cheating. Hainu Shonimza Ben Arashayim. Im Kol Zeh B'Megurei Aviv B'Yirasav Shebashamayim. He stays in his fear of heaven, fear of his Father in heaven. And the Maggid only as the second explanation adds the word of the Nitzutzos. So the Rebbe says, essentially, if you look at what the Maggid is saying, he's talking about two purposes that are being fulfilled when the neshama is down here. One for itself, its relationship with the Eibishter, sticking to its dveikos, to its yiras Hashem, and one for the world. That's much like the two inyanim in the neshama that we saw before. V'yesh leimar the shnei pirushim elehim shnei inyanim del sivav shenasim al yedei yiridas haneshama lamata. These two pirushim are the very same two inyanim that we saw before that happens through the neshama coming down to this world. First, he explains to you what happens when the neshama, for the neshama itself, when it comes to this world. Through the fact that it can retain its integrity. And even when it's in the ground and in the earthliness, in Eretz Canaan, it stays fearing of heaven. Through that, it achieves an even greater elevation to the way it was before it came down. Skip the brackets for a second. Then the Maggid gives another higher level. In other words, it's kind of going in order. The inyan zeh hu tachlis kavanas ha'gerida. He gives you the higher thing that happens to the neshama coming down, which is the tachlis of its gerida. Leger v'lesef ha'nitzutzes ha'kedeshim u'l'halesem l'mala. The gathering in of these sparks, the holy sparks, to bring them up. So the Maggid's two explanations are mamash tu shlavim. The neshama improves upon itself, and the neshama improves upon the world, which is second because it's the tachlis. The Rebbe in the brackets adds, "Ubifrat lefi amavur b'teira the masal v'yeshav Yankov uvagoyis tzamsadik l'sham." And teira the Alter Rebbe says, "Va'yedesha neshama mizgaberes al alamis v'estedin da'aguf uzman agolus umisereres ba'ava v'yira gam ha'ava v'yira gufa himnalim yeser miha'ava v'yira shekedem yiridasa." Not just as there an aliyah to the neshama, but the avodah of the neshama becomes higher. That the emotional connection that the neshama experiences, the passion for the Eibush, the love and fear, when you're after a challenge, it becomes greater. So that enhances the first word of the Maggid, the aliyah of the neshama vis-a-vis itself. Or you have in 72. B'sham in the Hagoyis of Etzem Tzedek, Shayisr and Dava v'Yida Shal Neshama Yidei Dos Lamato Al Derech Ma'az Bal Tshuva Al Tzadi Gomer, which really connects to Sivav. The aliyah of the neshama can be compared to the mile of Bal Tshuva over Tzadi Gomer. Say in the Rambam, Makash Bal Tshuva Imdin, sticking one in Yichel Lamed Bay. Yeah, in Yichel they're not even able. The Yichelas of a tzaddik can't stand in place of Bal Tshuva. So the mile of the neshama is like a Bal Tshuva. So that Mahabish brings out how great the aliyah of the neshama is. But the second inyan is even greater, the inyan of Birra Nitzutzis. And now the Rebbe says, V'yesh leimar, let's go even deeper to the Maggid's Torah. Sha'apirush de megurei aviv hu agiras v'asifas ha'nitzutzis ba behemshech v'koshur im apirush de megurei aviv v'yirasav b'shamayim. Both pirushim of the Maggid are one connected to the other. The pirush of ingathering Birra Nitzutzis is connected to Yiras Shamayim. And again, we'll just skip the brackets. What is the connection? The only way you can have a proper and complete refining, elevation of the nitzutzes, the second megurei, is only if you have a totally unsophisticated bittul to the Eibishter, like an evet, yira. Shekol kavanasi ba'avedase leibish v'latzmei gam leibichli l'davka beichuli v'rak l'shamesh es keinei lase es dira le'izbarech b'tachtenim, only not for himself, only to, not even to cleave to the Eibishter. It's also a tachlis, also evet neman, an evet pashut, the real bittul of an evet, to serve the Eibishter, to make a dira b'tachtenim. And that's what allows for the true birah to happen, a complete birah to happen. So you need megurei lashon yira, you need to be fully focused and fully aligned with that bittul to be able to have the true accomplishment you need to have in the world. And here the Rebbe says in 76, I was saying before, and now the Rebbe in the Maggid, he already alludes to the second pirush before the first pirush. The Maggid is hinting, the end of everything is the second pirush. The theme of our Maamar, coming up already in Machshava first, that as it plays out in Aveda, you need to have the fear, that Aveda before, and in order to have a proper Aveda of Meguri Lashon Asifa. So during the video Shiur, I forgot to go back to the Sugrayim in the middle of Sivches. So let's just take a minute now to go back and learn the brackets. Again, the Rebbe in this paragraph is talking about the fact that the two pirushim of the Maggid on Megurei, Lashon Asifa and Lashon Yira, are connected. Because the only way to have a shleimus of Megurei Lashon Asifa, the proper Birra Nitzutzis, is only if you have the Hakdama of Megurei Lashon Yira. So the Rebbe says in the Sugrayim, "V'hakesher d'shnei hapirushim muvan gam me'amavur b'teirei Rishon." This connection, or the fact that there has to be a connection between the two pirushim of Megurei, is also understood from the explanation of the Rebbe in Teirei, which the Rebbe brought in the last sif, also in the Sugrayim. Because over there he says, "Shebeza pirushim b'Megurei loshen yira v'loshen oitzer shneim eilim mekana echad." The Rebbe says that the two explanations in Megurei, fear and treasure house, gathering into a treasure house, are both connected. V'hagam shebeteirei Rishon. Even though if you look in Teirei, it's going to come out a little different than what we're saying over here. Gam lahapirush Megurei loshen oitzer Megurei koi al yira. In the end of the day, in the Maamar the Rebbe, if you look over there, the pshat in Megurei loshen oitzer ends up taking the translation of Megurei loshen yira. Meshkasav yiras Hashem hi oitzari. He brings the pasuk over there that it says that the treasure house of the tzaddik is yiras Hashem. You have the expression, the treasure house of Yiras Shemayim. So Megurei Loshen Oitzar ends up being related to Megurei Loshen Yira. Yesh leimar shehakesher d'shnei hapirushim hu gam lefi habir b'teiras Rav Magid shemegurei Loshen asifo knisa Oitzar koyal asifas hamnitzutzis. The very fact that the Alter Rebbe says that both pirushim are ila b'kana echad, even if his Megurei Loshen Oitzar ends up being mamish related to Yira, so I can learn from that I can make a kesher between the two pirushim of Megurei Loshen Yira and Loshen Asifa, even if I explain that Megurei Loshen Oitzar has to do with actual gathering of Asifas HaNitzutzos. But regardless, be that as it may, the actual kesher is as explained in the Pnim of the Maamar, that the Shleimus HaBirur of Megurei Loshen Asifa is only if you have the Hakdama of Yira. So Mamash Gevaldik, tying in the Magid's Torah to the Nekuda of our Maamar. By the way, I forgot to say before, in Arda 64, when the Rebbe brings the word of the Magid, he says, "L'hoyer sha'yishtalkus shalei v'chein ha'geula shal admur hazaken hoysa b'yem gimel parshas vayeshev." The ishtalkus and the Alter Rebbe's gula happened in parshas vayeshev, so it's very apropos to bring a word of parshas vayeshev. Ure'ei sichas leil chaf kislev tafreish talek dalet tziv gimel. I looked it up, looked at the Diburim. The Fidik Rebbe over there says that Yem Gimel parshas vayeshev was the ishtalkus of the Magid. 26 years later was the geula of the Alter Rebbe on the same day, Yom Gimel Parshas Vayeshev. And then he said there was a Fabrenga once by Chassidim, where Rabbi Shmuel bar Yisrael said the 26 years between the Magid, Histalkus, and the Gula of the Alter Rebbe is connected Shem Havaya, because it's Gematria Chavav. So I guess that's what the Rebbe is referring to over here, the fact that they're both connected to the Inyan of Parshas Vayeshev, and maybe Shem Havaya has to do with Birurim or something, I'm not sure. Okay. But after this arichos in the Magid's Torah, what do we have now? What are we left with? Bottom line, as it relates to our Maamar, we're talking about the power of the Aveda of a Yid as it plays out the Peyal Mamish. Your Aveda actually is what created the inspiration to creation. It's that powerful. The Gimel Amudim Shalayam Elam Emid always existed because of what the Yid will do in his Aveda. But nevertheless, it doesn't compare to what you're going to do practically. Because practically you're going to bring the Welt to the Inyan of Tshuva through your Avedas HaBirurim. And we now know that the Avedas HaBirurim, in order to be B'Shleimus, has to be accompanied by a Yira, by a Bittul. What is the actual Birur? How does the Birur happen? Till now we're saying in general terms, to the Aveda of Yidden. To the Aveda of Yidden in those three kavin. Tes. V'yini ha-Birur da'elam b'payel, u'ayidei ha-Aveda b'gimel ha-kavin, the-Teira Aveda u'gimilas chasadim. The Birur of the Welt with Peyal Mamish is through the Aveda of the three kavin of Teira Aveda u'gmach. It has to be all prefaced, like the Magid. Megurei Loshen Yira is first. That has to permeate the entire Avedas HaBirurim. But the Avedas HaBirurim itself takes place through the Aveda and the three kavin of Teira Aveda u'gmach. The same way the creation was through the three kavin of Chagas. So too is the birur of Welt, which will make the world into Dir Yisbarech, happens through the Aveda and all three kavin. And this is another diuk in the pasuk by Yeshev Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Aviv. This is why it says that the word is Yaakov. It's Yaakov sitting in the land in the Megurei Aviv. The Inyan Megurei Aviv abirur da'elam wa'idei Yaakov. The Inyan of Megurei Loshen Asifa, the Inyan of Allah HaNitzutzos happens through Yaakov. Hashlishi v'hameshula sheba'avis. Bachir sheba'avis. The third. Many threes are connected to Yaakov. That brings in 78. Yaakov chaval nachlasei v'hu hashlishi ba'avis hameshulash b'shalosh zachiyos u'b'sifri ma'cheval zen meshulash. A rope is twined from three ropes. Ha'Yaakov shlishi la'avis v'chut hameshulash. So you see the Inyan of three is very connected to Yaakov, the chosen one of the Avis. What's Yaakov's specialty? Liyosei kolul mikol kol hagimel kavin. Because he has within him all three kavin. Ki Yaakov utiferes, hakelol gam hamidas chesed ugvura, mishkasav lekei abi Avram upachad Yitzchak hayali. I had the God of my father Avram and the pachad of Yitzchak. I had both Avram. The shoyeh begam mimidas chesed Avram va'agvura pachad Yitzchak. I had both kavin, and then he was himself, the third kav. That's why it says Yaakov, because that alludes to the fact that the beard has to have all three kavin in it. That's why the Torah is a Torah of three. Many parts of Matan Torah were shaykhs to three, as the Gemara brings down, and there's a whole Rishima. Moshe was the third Shevet, and there's Kenim, Levi, and Misaelim, three parts of Torah, a whole bunch of threes. Because the point of Matan Torah was to allow for, set into motion, the bidur of Welt. As the Rambam brings down. The whole Torah was there to make Shalom and Welt, bidur and Welt. And that happens through the Aveda of the three Kavin. And here the Rebbe returns to the Maamar Chazal that we began with, just to explain a diuk. And I think the expression over here is why it says Kilu P'da'ani. Out of all the things, a person learns Torah, Gemach, and Mispal Matzibur. What are you comparing it to? You're comparing it to redemption. What's the connection of these three things to redemption? Because Taka, the way to redemption, the ultimate redemption of the Nitzutzis, and coming down into actually Kipshute, redeeming Yidden and the Eivishter, Mashiach, comes through doing three kavin. The Peda'ani, the actual key to Peda'ani is all three kavin of Esek Terek Machos, and that's why the Gemara says that it takes those three to create Peda'ani. Fascinating, Ha'ara 85. What are you saying, three kavin? It's just one deed to tip the scales. So the Rebbe says that first of all, it says in the Rambam, if you really zoom in, it's not talking about Mashiach. I know the Rebbe explained many times, Tshuva Batzala is the Geula. But really it's talking about just the Zchiyah v'mishpat. You should always see yourself halfway, and the world halfway. If you want it to be meritorious or not meritorious, one action can tip the scales. But as a matter of fact, for the macro picture, to create the bidur, you have to have all three. And even more so, Bey is Mefurasham. Shalifni Amaisa Echad HaKol Shakol. It doesn't say the world has no merits, you have no merits or misdeeds. Everything is equal. Equal means everything is ready to go. Even if the Rambam is talking about Mashiach, it means that the world is ready to go. Upshita sheyesh kol hagimel kavin. There already exists all three kavin. Elamah, you're throwing it over the edge. Your one Maisa can tip the scales and bring the Yeshua of Atzal. Akopanim, that's the Rebbe and Siftes. This is why the Gemara links these three things to Peda'ani, because the Pediyah happens through all three things, through all Gimel Kavin. Rebbe Sif Yud, Mihine, Mikevon shetachlas hakavana b'ridas hanashama lemata. Hulei b'shvilo ili d'tshuva shenasa b'hanashama. Let's return for a moment to Sivav. When it came to explaining the actual ilu which the Yidden create, the Rebbe explained that it takes place both on the level of the neshama and on the level of the world. But the one on the level of the world is the most important one. The Torah we can now revisit the point we made in Siv Gimel. The fact that the Yid's Aveda is what creates the form of Chagas, Lemaila, to inspire creation. Which part of the Yid's Aveda was it that inspired creation? We can now go a little deeper there and say that when we say that the Aveda of Yidden become retroactively the power, the force behind creation, it wasn't Stam the Aveda of Yidden. It wasn't the selfish part of the Aveda of Yidden, what's going to improve the neshama. What got creation going was the fact that the world is going to be nisbarer and return to its source as a Baal Tshuva. The beer that's going to tuzechuf in Welt, the Tachas HaKavana, was what inspired the Chagas, the beginning of creation. Now, and based on this, and based on the entire thing of the Maamar, Yuvan Ativuch, the Beis HaPirushim, Podoh v'Shalom Nafshi. The Rebbe comes back to answer the question, as I gave you before, when we learned Sif Beis, what's the taka, the tivuch of the two Pirushim? Whether the Eibishter is redeeming Yidden, or we're redeeming the Eibishter. Pirush HaPoshat, Podoh Game, Rekoya HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Pirush Chazal shePodoh Gamer koyal ha'adam ha'isik b'Torah v'gemach u'mispal limatzibur. Whether it's the Eibishter being the Podoh or we're being the Podoh and redeeming the Eibishter. Ki zeh shakadosh baruch hu Podoh es Yisrael. Because the first Podoh, the simple Podoh, the Eibishter redeeming the Yidden, the Adla inin kipshute, and as it actually takes the physical form. And I think it's mamash pratis in today's time, as we all know what we're dealing with in Eretz Yisrael, and we need the Podoh v'Shalom. Shagam bizman hagolus in ilayonum v'layishon shemer Yisrael. Shakadosh baruch hu shemer es Yisrael hein beruchnius ve'in begashmius. The Eibishter guards us physically and spiritually as kein zach zol zenit ken andrin chas v'shalom, that nothing can touch them. Ukemavur bepratius ba'al mizmer yeshuv b'seiser, as it says in Yeshuv b'seiser, which is Mizmer Tzadik Aleph. You know, people Aleph Mincha, what does it say over there? All the enemies are going to go away. Nothing is going to touch the Yidden. The Rebbe says in 87, it is in the Shetilim of Avidas Kislev, this pasuk of Yeshuv b'seiser. To the point that afterwards the Eibishter will actually redeem the Yidden from Galus. The whole Podoh of the Eibishter, whatever form it takes, physical and spiritual, it happens through the person. The Eibishter's Podoh can only be done through the person's Podoh, through you being paid of the Eibishter. And when you do that, the Podoh that happens milamayla actually takes a higher form than the way it is inside itself. You need the Yid to be Podoh in order to get the Eibishter to be Podoh in an even higher way. And with that kind of, the Maamar's conversation is closed. And now that Rebbe moves deeper into the Maamar Chazal of Kol Ha'esek b'Torah, and also more stresses on the pasuk Podoh v'Shalom nafshi themselves. Yud Aleph. U'medayik b'zeh Kol Ha'esek b'Torah. Which element of Limud HaTorah is going to be the one that plays the part in the Peda'ani and the Birani Tzutzis and the Tachas HaKavana? It's Oisek b'Torah. Shavidase b'Torah u'gmachu tefillah hi ba'efen de Eisek. That the way you learn Torah, the way you're involved in the other things too, have to be Oisek. Have to be dealing with it like you would do in a business. The Kimay Ba'al Eisek u'tarud v'asek b'zakol hayom. Like a businessman is busy with it all day. Even if he isn't actually in business right now, but he's thinking about it, his mind is occupied with it. Same thing as somebody who's Isaac in Torah, that means that he's asuk, he's dealing with it all day, even if he's not learning. But what does it mean practically? That when you're dealing with optional, mundane matters, you do it l'shem shamayim till da'eyu, 2 levels. Right? You're doing it just l'shem shamayim with an outer intent, or it becomes a way to know the Eibishter. Even when he is dealing with physical things, what's occupying his mind? Knowing the Eibishter, which is Torah. In other words, how can I know the Eibishter from more things in the world? That was Mitzayim to 2 Maamarim in Peches. I just have the quotes over it. It's Mamish. The Fidik Rebbe goes down on this inyan. When a person is asik b'mischar gashmi, all day he's into it because it's neget in b'yeser. So too in Torah shouldn't be only b'zman alimud. You should be masr v'nasam lazeh. So that negele b'pnimiyusay, as that is ungetan in them. Every hour, every day that he's dealing with his business, he's also dealing with Yoni Torah, whether it's b'achzakas leimdei Torah, or when he speaks in business, he's me'eder b'Yoni Torah. Maamar Shlashenis over here, and then also in the other Maamar also. Both Maamar and Peches, that Fidik Rebbe is pushing this nakuda of Oisek b'Torah. Then it becomes a redemption in peace. Shalom in your soul. Not just he redeemed my soul in peace. He redeemed my soul with a peaceful way. He created shalom in my soul. Shalom b'pamalya shel mayla, shalom b'pamalya shel mata, shebezin yanim eila yeshlam gam b'nefesh ha'adam. Peace in the higher realms, peace in the lower realms, and peace in the higher and lower realms within yourself. We all have tension within us. We all have 2 elements, the part that strives for the spiritual and the part that wants to pull us down. And there's harmony created between them through Isaac b'Torah. The Ad Shanasa Shalom B'Shleimusei B'Niva Lebeira Shanasa Yisrael Ayidei Raisa V'Kuchabrichu Kul Echad. There's a complete shalom between us and the Eibishter. Yisrael, through Torah, becomes one with the Eibishter. V'Gam B'Chelkei B'Olam. We create peace also in the portion of our world. No more tension. The Eibishter is completely at one with his creation. The Neisaf al Shenyani Ha'elam Einam Meina Meisem Yavedas Hashem Ela Shehem Atzma Maskimim U'Masayim. They don't just not stop you from doing Aveda, they actually agree and they help out. Kibir Rabim Hayu Imadi, that's the deeper taich. The multitudes that were with me means that David says, I got the forces of evil to be on my side as well. The sparks of holiness, over here. The sparks of holiness that are hidden in the physical things are standing with a chukka and they're davening for you, be mevarer me. Like the simple meaning of Kivrabim Hayimadi. Shagam Anshe Avshalom Hispalul Nitzchenu Shal David. Avshalom's men, David for David's Nitzachim. The Eimer Podoh Bishalem, and the pasuk says Podoh Bishalem, Vishalem, with peace. And the word Bishalem who beis Shalem. Al Derechem Avur B'Teira Er Debra Maschal Shavti V'Shalem Al Beis Avi. The original source is from Shavti V'Shalem. Over there it's with two types of peace. Shalom Il Maila Lamata. From above to below and below to above. In 96, the Rebbe says that that's taken, in Teira Eira and in Teira Chaim. But in Eira Teira, Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi, Mefaresh Shagam B'Shalom, the Podoh V'Shalom Nafshi who beis Shalom. Ela Shabiyadin in beis Shalom Sham Be'efen Acher. So over there in a different way, explain the two Shalom. But the Rebbe is borrowing the two Shaloms from V'Shavti V'Shalom, but applying it to Podoh V'Shalom based on the Tzemach Tzedek's Vart that you can apply the two Shaloms in Podoh V'Shalom. What are the two Shaloms? Shalom milmayla lemata, hamshacha milmayla lemata idei teiro mitzvahs. V'shalom milmata lemayla abedas hatshuva, ad la hatshuva devaruach tashuv lalikim asher nesana, neshama beguf larichus yamim mishanim tevis, v'gam biyesi beguf u'bivchinas varuach tashuv gemer bal derech elam chatira b'chayecha. There's a hamshacha milmayla lemata through teiro and mitzvahs, but then also there's the abedas hatshuva that comes out. The tshuva also totally of yourself. That as a neshama beguf larichus yamim, you feel the nekuda of Ruach Tashuv. Elam chatira b'chayecha. You experience the ultimate gilui as you live in this world. These two shalims are actually shayachim, the gimel hakavin, teiro gmachot tefillah b'tzibur. Those three kavim which accomplish the Podoh in its ultimate sense are very much connected to these two ways of shalim. Teiro gmach and mamshachim l'mayla lemata, utfila yalav lemata l'mayla. Teiro and gmach is bringing down, bringing the Eibusha down to the world, and also gmach is a giving type of a thing. Tefillah is you connecting from above, from below to above. And now that Rebbe pushes the envelope further of Shalom. Yud Beis v'hinei amitis in yana Shalom hu kamay merazal ala pasuk v'nasati Shalom ba'aretz v'cherev l'saver ba'aretzachem afilu cherev shel Shalom. The truest Shalom is, like the Eibusha promised in Parshas B'chukei Yisai, I'm going to give you such peace that a sword won't pass through your land. Even a sword of peace. Sword of peace means a holy sword. V'yadua, it's known, as the Rebbe Rashab explains, and the Friedrich Rebbe explains, shecherev shel shalom hi ha'aveda di tefillah. What's a holy sword? What's a holy war? Davening. Shas leisa shas krava, the Zohar says. Davening is time of war. It's a holy war. V'shalom shel lo yesh afilu cherev shel shalom hi ha'aveda di Torah. Specifically, when you're talking about shalom that's only and exclusively peace, that's Torah. This explains also why the order goes in the following way. First Torah, then Gemach and Tefillah. Usually the way it's reflected in daily life is first you daven, be'ikr, and then you learn. Even the learning that happens before davening, it's a separate story. It's a hachana to davening. And actually, Tefillah also comes after the Hagdama of Gemach. You're supposed to give tzedakah and then daven. So if practically you give tzedakah, you daven and then you learn, why does it say first learn, then tzedakah, then davening? Because we're out to show you the shalom which can be accomplished through the Gimel Kavin. And of the Gimel Kavin, the ultimate shalom is produced by Torah. Chaye Eilam. But if in the Terasi Yom Nasi, Chaye Eilam is the Gemara. The Gemara says, Rav Asar Rav Hamnuna, davening very long. And he said, Manichin Chaye Eilam, Veiskin B'Chaye Shah. They leave the life of eternity, and they deal with temporary life. Chaye Eilam in Chassidus is explained that Torah is the ultimate inyan of Birur. And what kind of Torah when it's Taka Chaye Eilam? That's all there is. But if in the Terasi Yom Nasi, She'eifin Zeh B'limud HaTorah B'pnim Yisrael Yanim, Shayach L'chol Echad Ve'echad B'chol Makom V'chol Yom. Learning Torah in the way of Terasi Yom Nasi B'pnim Yisrael Yanim, everyone can do. One of our fathers says, "B'shekin the pashtus." Yeah, the pashtus, not everybody can do that. Terasi Yom Nasi means literally learning, not stopping all day. But B'pnim Yisrael Yanim, you and I can be Terasi Yom Nasi. Which means what? When I'm learning Torah, I'm learning like a person who learns Terasi Yom Nasi. How would a person learn if you're Terasi Yom Nasi? That in this moment, all I have is Torah. The Rebbe is in 106 has been signed to Hara 109. In 106 been signed to Kutzichas Chelik Yud Beis. It's a letter from Erev Lag Beimer Tavshin Lamed Daled. The Rebbe was talking about Ashbi, and he says that Ashbi is Terasi Yom Nasei. Va'af derak Ashbi v'chaveira of Terasi Yom Nasei. Only they are Terasi Yom Nasei. Harei efshar lechol echad ve'echad likbaya itim b'teira be'oifin shebe'eis hahi yiyeh limudei be'oifin Terasi Yom Nasei. Every person can set aside time for Torah in such a way that in this moment, I'm Terasi Yom Nasei. If you were looking at me and Ashbi, you would see the same thing. You would see the same orangutankeit, the same dedication, the same full focus, the same complete lack of distraction, the idea that ein loy ba'ilomai ela ha'teira bilvat. And then your learning will actually have an everlasting effect. They affect all your yonim all day and all your life. They become a Torah life. The Terasi Yom Nasei feeds and charges your whole life with that kind of attitude. So now we can't be Terasi Yom Nasei. Yeah, but when Mashiach comes, that's what we're going to be. The whole Asik of the whole world is only going to be to know the Eibishter, as the Rambam says. So you learn Torah now and make it your entire life. That's a hachana to Mashiach's time, and Torah is going to be our entire life. And what does it mean to really know the Eibishter? Not just to learn more Torah, more Gemara. The Rebbe Rashab said, it's a quote from Sefer HaSichos Tafshin Gimel. I have the full quote over here. The first day of Pesach, Tafshin Gimel, the Rebbe said that he heard from his father as that is sich misbeided unter a verschlossener Tier. When he locks himself, when he secludes himself under a locked door, and learns Likutei Torah, he hears Atzmos, he senses Atzmos. And if the Rebbe Rashab said so that he heard Atzmos when he learns Likutei Torah, and that's what really Yediyas Hashem looks like, we can have a main of that. Like it says in the Sifrei Chakira, that if you know the Eibishter, you are the Eibishter. So the Rebbe Rashab once commented on this, every person in Anash who deals in, look at the word Isaac, in Chassidus and Avodah Shebelev, der hert jederer und der fielt dem Heyisiv, was es kommt von der Yedaitiv Sheben Neshama. You can actually the Hayisiv, the becoming one with the Eibishter that comes through the Yedaitiv of Neshama. Neshama knows the Chassidus, learns the Chassidus, understands the Chassidus, becomes one with it, and then you have the Hayisiv that comes as a result of that. It's fascinating, by the way. The source of this memory of the Rebbe Rashab comes from a sikha from the Frierdiker Rebbe, which he said on Tes Nisan Tafshin, just 1 month after arriving in America. It was in Lakewood then. It was the 4th public Farbrengen that the Frierdiker Rebbe ever held. And he tells a story over there that there was somebody in front of the Rebbe Rashab, one chassid, who said that Chassidus, he ach v'rak lebali madrega b'kishrein b'haskala u'va'aveda. Chassidus is only for people that have a very high level, very talented, much haskala, much aveda. Avol leila anoshim regilim kameinu, but not for regular guys like us. Said the Rebbe Rashab, ein ha'inyin kain. That's not so. And then he said the quote, Kol echad lechad me'anash was tut in learning Chassidus and Avodah Shebelev. And you see those 2 dots over here? The missing part of the quote is that the Rebbe Rashab said, because you have to have both. If you learn Chassidus and you don't do Avodah Shebelev, is there limud ken limud nit. And if you only do Avodah Shebelev and you don't learn, is the Aveda ken Aveda nit. You have to have both. But when you have both, every person can deher and feel the Hayisiv, which comes as a result of the Yedaitiv. Gimel concludes the Rebbe, V'zehu Podoh v'shalom nafshi chuli Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu kol eisek b'teiro v'gemach u'mispalel matzibur chuli k'deilu Podoh chuli. This is the inner meaning of the Gemara. That the Eibishter says on Podoh v'shalom nafshi that if you do teira gemach and mispalel matzibur, it's ki'ilu Podoh. Look at the words, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'amirasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu havi ma'isa. When the Eibishter talks, things happen. Vayemer Hashem yiyar v'yiyar. The whole creation came about through words of the Eibishter. When the Eibishter talks, it's havi ma'isa. First, it's only ki'ilu padani, an illustrative redemption, a metaphorical redemption, because you can't see it. And part of me thinks that the Rebbe is here alluding to the general Nekudah of the Maamar. There's already a Podoh which exists now, because it's going to happen, but it's not seen le'enei basar. But then the Podoh of Shalom plays out in its most ultimate form. Practically, In Elam Ma'asiyah, there's no lower world. P'diyas HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Yisrael me'beinu Misa'elam. P'diyah kipshuta, bli kaf adimyan. Actual redemption of the Eibishter and from among the nations. No kaf adimyan. She'az yiyah esek b'teiro v'gemacha v'tfilah b'tzibur b'tachas hashleimus kim mitzvahs ritzei necha. Then we're going to do everything. All three kavin, but we're going to do it ultimately. Like the Eibishter really wants, like the mitzvah was in the Eibishter's ratzon to begin with, as Chassidus explains. B'bias Mashiach tzidkenu, Yaveh v'yigalenu v'yalichinu k'memiras la'artzenu v'karif mamish. Mashiach's going to come, should redeem us very close, very soon. The Gam Baloshan Targum Ba'agala Didan. And also in Aramaic, we should say, Ba'agala Didan. The Rebbe points to Tera'er in R 113, over there the Alter Rebbe talks about the Maila of speaking in other Lashonos. That when a Yid speaks in Asias of the Umais, regarding his Maso Matan, his business, then he davens and learns with Mesiras Nefesh, with Kavanah, it's Maila, all the other Asias, all the everything else in the world. So when you say Baloshan Targum Ba'agala Didan, you're bringing the Bekar of Mamash into it, you're being Mevarer the rest of the world as well. The Birur Ha'elam that we're speaking about in this Maamar. And the Rebbe ends off with the Eilik with the Sichas Chilik Tes, on 23, Arah 61, where there the Rebbe has an order. He also ends off a Sicha, Bekar of Mamash Ba'agala Didan, and he says the Hisafa of Ba'agala Didan over Bekar of Mamash is, first of all, it doesn't say over here. First of all, Bekar of Mamash means close. Close could be measured by the Eibishter. The Eibishter has it every day of the Eibishter is 1,000 years. So soon, very soon for the Eibishter, speedily, could be in 1,000 years. So we say Ba'agala Didan, our speediness, the way we understand it. And then the second part that Rebbe says, because also B'lashon Targum. And there's something special about bringing down the inyan of Mashiach B'lashon Targum. Like the whole Maamar explains, something special about bringing the entire world to a state of tshuva, not just yourself, but everything around you, things that are opposed, also become Messiah Maskimim. So we also bring Lashon Targum, the Ba'agala Didan, and the Geula comes, Taka, B'karev Mamish, U'Ba'agala Didan. Amen. B'chein Yehi Ratzon.